Hello, glad to see you on my channel. I really value it. And today I want to share with you a wonderful story. It's a dramatic story that will come as a total shock to everybody. It is a really amazing story. So enjoy watching it.
The Stone couple was sitting around the table discussing the imminent departure of their only daughter Selena to New York. Billy, the head of the family, said to his wife, "And I'm not at all surprised that our Selena chose medicine over law. Why is that? She, finishing 11th grade, was more inclined to enter the law," said the wife of the man, Lucy. "Selena made the right choice in favor of medicine, but think about it. What kind of lawyer is she? She's a soft-spoken girl, and lawyers are supposed to be assertive people," I think the man said. "You have a strange judgment. If you follow your logic, then the doctors are all soft-hearted. You should have been an investigator, because you asked provocative questions," Billy said with a laugh, and when he saw that his wife frowned, he added, "I was just kidding. You're a super cool teacher. And if you were an investigator, I would never have asked you to be my wife, because I don't like bossy tone. And you're a sweet, smart woman. You're a fox, Billy," Lucy said with a smile, and then added thoughtfully, "You're right. Selena was right to become a doctor. Remember how she used to bring all the wounded cats and dogs home to bandage them when she was a child? Even brought a squirrel once." The conversation of the parents was interrupted by Selena, who came home. The girl saw her mother and father talking in the kitchen and immediately realized that it was about her. She asked her parents what they were talking about. The head of the family smiled and replied that they were talking about their daughter's imminent departure. Selena laughed and said, "I thought you were talking about me. You are restless," and with these words the girl kissed first her mother and then her father. And so the day of Selena's departure came. She stood on the platform with her parents. The family was waiting for a passing train, which was due to arrive any minute now. Lucy gave her daughter a final admonition that Selena should always keep them in the loop and think less about guys. The girl laughed in response and said that her priority is to get an education, and then the device of personal life. Selena's mother on this statement only sighed, as she realized that if the feeling of love for her daughter comes, all the maternal warnings will fall into the abyss. Soon the train approached and the girl, hugging her parents, stepped into the carriage. She was happy to leave her village in New York and at the same time a little sad. She wanted to get an education, but to part with her parents Selena did not want to. After a while, the girl entered medical school, which immediately informed her mother and father. Selena was given a dormitory as a non-resident. The girl got a room on the second floor. Her neighbors were Melanie and Ariana. The students became friends with each other literally from the first minute of their acquaintance. And for Selena began a new time in her life, where she now lived independently from her parents. The girl at first, it was wild that in the morning it does not wake her mom's affectionate voice, and the alarm clock rings, which notifies that it's time to get up and get ready for school. But literally in a month, Selena slowly adapted and got used to the new way of life. The girl called her parents 2 or 3 times a week as promised. She told about her studies, as well as the sights of the big city. The mother, listening to her daughter, was proud of Selena's successes and prayed to the Lord that her girl would do well in life. Half a year flew by, and the girl came to her native village for winter vacation. And what was Selena's surprise when she learned that her father had been lying in the district hospital for 2 weeks. The girl reproachfully turned to her mother. "Why didn't you inform me about it?" "Daughter, I'm sorry, but it was my father who insisted on it. He didn't want you to worry about him. Your father was afraid that the excitement would affect your education," Lucy said quietly. "Mom, but you realize that this is not the case when you have to hide from me that my father has serious heart problems," said the girl. "I know, sweetie, but you have to understand. It's your daddy's request. Let's not bicker among ourselves, and better tomorrow we'll go to the hospital and visit your father. By the way, he asked for homemade dumplings, which means he's getting better. I bought the stuffing this morning. Will you help me make dumplings like in the good old days?" said the lady of the house. "Of course, Mom. How could it be otherwise?" said her daughter affectionately and kissed her mother on the cheek. On New Year's Eve, the girl's father was discharged. Selena rejoiced like a child that her father was better and now he was home. The girl took the word from both parents after her father's discharge that from now on they would keep her also informed of all the news. The head of the household, as well as his wife, were touched by the words of their daughter. Vacation time flew by and Selena left again for her studies. Arriving in New York, she met with her dormitory neighbors. The girls told each other how they spent their time, how they celebrated the new year. Naomi told that her boyfriend made a proposal to her on vacation. Her friends were happy for her and Selena immediately asked a question. Since you got proposed to, you should have given an answer. But that's how Ariana, and I understand that you said yes. But that's not what we're interested in right now. When do we expect an invitation to the wedding? My boyfriend and I also thought about it and decided that it would be better in the summer because it will be cheaper to celebrate the festive event, said Naomi. And why cheaper? Ariana asked, perplexed. The other two girls laughed at the girl's question and then explained Selena to her roommate. Ariana, it is immediately obvious that you are a city dweller. It's just that Naomi and I are from villages, albeit different, but we both know that in the summer begins suffering. That is, we'll go vegetables, fruits from their own vegetable garden. And here we can conclude that the holiday so with some of their products will be cheaper. Ah, now it's clear, said Ariana. The first year of school flew by, and the friends went home for the summer. Selena, having arrived in the village, began to help her parents in the vegetable garden. When Julie came, she informed her mother and father that she would go to visit Naomi for a few days. The girl's parents were not against it, as they knew that the daughter's friend was getting married. Selena, after the wedding, told her parents how beautiful the bride was and how wonderful the marriage celebration was. The girl so vividly described the events of the celebration that Selena's mother could not stand it and said, I have the feeling that it's not Naomi got married, but you. Mom, you're gonna say the same thing. Just I had a lot of fun at this wedding and would like my marriage ceremony to be as bright and memorable, said the girl. Do you already have a boyfriend? Lucy asked unexpectedly. No, as he will appear, you and Daddy will be the first to know, with a smile, said her daughter. Time moved on quietly and Selena was already 3 months away from the end of the 4th year. She studied well, and she was often put by teachers as an example to other students. This fact pleased the girl, but marred the other thing, that she was not able to communicate with the opposite sex. She could not understand why she had barely met a guy. Her communication stopped after a month. And Selena decided on this topic to talk to Ariana, who already had a young man. She turned to her friend. I cannot understand what is wrong with me. After all, lichen face is not ugly, and the figure is not pumped up, and still no guy. Naomi is married, you have a fiancé, and my relationship with guys lasts for a month at most. Can you explain that to me? Of course I can. You've been reading novels about Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and acting like this. You have an old-fashioned judgment that you can't do anything before marriage. You need to realize that we live in a different era. Now virginity is not the most important thing in life. You've probably never even been kissed. Am I right? Ariana said. How can you allow a kiss if you're not sure how you feel? Selena asked, perplexed. Well, you really are a nugget, exclaimed her friend, amazed, and continued. When you like a guy, you don't have to play hard to get. You can suit to let himself kiss, and if you will be unpleasant, you will fight back. And if, on the contrary, it means that this young man is meant for you by fate. A few days after this conversation with her roommate in the dormitory, Selena went to put money on her phone after school. The girl thought to herself that soon it would be summer vacation again, and when she arrived home, her mother would again start talking about the beau. Selena was so absorbed in her thoughts that she accidentally pushed a passerby. She flinched involuntarily and mumbled words of apology, and then only wanted to go further when she heard herself being addressed. I wonder what such thoughts could be occupying this charming girl. I apologize again. I was just thinking shyly, said Selena, and only then looked at the person who addressed her. Let me walk you better, or you'll get a couple dozen passersby off the path, said the stranger. Don't bother yourself. After the collision with you, my thoughts are gone. So don't worry, quietly said the girl. Oh no, this will not do. Tell me where you want to go, and under my guidance I will take you there, said the stranger. And the girl unexpectedly agreed to the guy's offer to accompany her. The couple leisurely headed to the cell phone salon. On the way, they got acquainted with each other. The girl learned that the interlocutor's name is Harry. He is 27 years old. He himself is local and works as a mechanic at the service station. Soon Selena put money on the account and said that now it was time for her to return to the hostel. The guy again volunteered to escort her. Harry didn't get a refusal. They walked and chatted about various topics. When they approached the dormitory, they ran into Naomi, who looked meaningfully at her mate. Selena caught her friend's gaze and was embarrassed. Harry, seeing the girl's embarrassment, asked, "This must be an acquaintance of yours." "Yes, a roommate. The interrogation is about to begin," she said quietly. "And you do not get lost and say that I am your old boyfriend and you hid me from everyone," with a smile, said the new acquaintance. "But that would be a lie. Even if I say so, then buddies will not believe, because after the institute I am almost all the time in the dorm," said the girl. "Do you mean to say that you lead a reclusive lifestyle, or you are not interested in the male sex?" said the young man. "To the first question, I will answer that it is so, but to the second, I will answer that apparently on my horizon has not yet met the one and only prince," said the interlocutor. "So we make a sharp turn in your life. I'll be your prince. I think I will pull on this role," said the guy. The girl laughed in response. After that, they talked for a while and then exchanged phone numbers, and Selena soon ran to the dormitory. The girl was right. As soon as she appeared in the room, Naomi and her friend pounced on her with questions. The roommates wanted to know who this young man was, how old he was, and most importantly, what connects this guy with Selena. The girl had nothing left but to tell about the acquaintance with Harry. The next day, the guy called Selena and offered to meet. The girl gladly agreed. From that day on, their meetings became almost every day. Selena was happy that she had a guy she liked. She noted to herself that with Harry it is easy and simple to communicate. Her pals teased the girl, saying, "Soon you will definitely run to the registry office." "Oh, come on." Running ahead of the locomotive, laughing replied, laughing Selena. There was a week left. As the end of training, Harry met the girl after the institute and offered to go to his house. Selena had already been to the guy's house many times. There were only kisses between them and no more. But this time the man, when the girl began to get ready to go to the dormitory, said, "You'll be leaving soon, and there you'll have practice. And then you'll spend the summer vacation with your parents. So please spend this night with me." Selena subconsciously waited for this proposal from the chosen one. But still the words of the guy led her into confusion. The girl was silent for a long time, and Harry waited for her answer. And then the young man approached Selena and began to kiss her gently on the lips, and then picked her up in his arms and carried her to the bedroom. The girl could not refuse the man, and this night spent in his arms. Selena stayed overnight at Harry's house a few more times after that. The girl was happy. She thought that she had met a man with whom she would live her whole life. Selena was confident in her boyfriend 100%, that Harry would never leave her. Soon the girl left for her village, where her parents were eagerly waiting for her. Selena, on arrival, initially wanted to tell her mom about the fact that she had a young man, but then decided to hang back. However, after a while, this secret was revealed quite by accident. The girl in one of the days felt bad. She during the day was mutilated. She immediately realized what was the cause of the ailment. Selena's mother also noticed that her daughter often vomits, and Lucy asked the girl, "Maybe you should tell me something." "Mom, I'm pregnant. All the symptoms point to it, and I've already been to the gynecologist." "The doctor confirmed," quietly said the daughter. "Does the father know about it? And who is he?" Lucy said, "He doesn't know yet. His name is Harry. He is a very good man. I want to tell him the news today," she said. "Are you sure about him?" The woman said in a quiet voice. "I am sure," the daughter said firmly. And in the evening of the same day, she called Harry and told him about her pregnancy. She waited for strong emotions from the chosen one, but the guy was silent. Selena suddenly felt that she was completely mistaken, that the news of the baby will be a joyful event for the guy. And in this she was convinced after a few minutes, as the man said that at the moment he was not ready to try on the role of a father. Selena did not say anything else, but hung up the phone. The girl got up and went out into the yard. She didn't want her parents to see her tears. She went deep into the garden, sat down near an apple tree, and only then gave vent to her emotions. Selena cried quietly, but then managed to pull herself together and mentally ordered herself not to dissolve. Now the young woman was thinking about what she should do in this situation. The girl did not even think that Harry would want to marry, so she would have to find a way out of the situation on her own. Soon Selena came home, where she saw her mother's gaze. The girl realized that her mother had guessed everything. Selena approached Lucy and quietly spoke. "I know you figured it all out. Mom, I myself am to blame for everything, as I trusted a weak man who cannot be responsible for his actions. But Mom, I will have this child, because I have already accepted it with all my heart, and don't try to convince me otherwise. I only ask that you don't say anything to Daddy. You know he has a bad heart. I don't want him to worry. I'm not going to change your mind. You're already an independent young woman, though you'll always be a little girl to me. You've made your choice, and I'm glad you made it. I won't say anything to my dad. We'll make up some legend about where the father of the baby's future has gone. Although your father loves you very much, and he would have understood the situation," Lucy said and hugged her daughter. The summer period flew by and Selena went back to her studies. She didn't call Harry. The man didn't bother the girl either. For Selena's friends, this circumstance seemed suspicious, and friends began to stealthily ask questions that interested them. Selena understood that the roommates are eating curiosity and therefore, all without secrecy told them. Ariana was the first to react. "What a bastard Harry is." After that, Naomi spoke up. "He seemed like such a decent man to me. Selena, don't despair, you'll meet your prince. If I were you, I'd call his parents and tell them about the pregnancy so they can influence their son. Don't be silly. I don't need anyone else living under the thumb of a stick. If Harry loved me, he'd be there for me, not telling me he wasn't ready to be a father. It's my child, and I'll figure out how to live my life on my own," the young woman said firmly. Selena thought that already with Harry we'll never meet again, but a month later, as she came to study in New York, the man showed up. The guy was waiting for the girl near the dormitory. He approached Selena and pronounced that they needed to talk. The young woman coldly asked what the conversation would be about. Harry calmly said that he was ready to give money to terminate the pregnancy. The girl laughed upon hearing this offer and clearly pronouncing each word uttered. "Leave your finances to please the next passeress on your list. Also, please don't show up in my life again. Just know that I have a toxicosis at the sight of you. I hope the meaning of this word you do not need to explain." And after these words, the girl, raising her head, proudly followed in the dormitory. This was their last meeting. Harry didn't bother her anymore. After a while, the young woman went on maternity leave at the institute, taking a leave of absence. And immediately after that, she came to her parents. Selena told her father the truth about the father of the child. Billy complained that the guy turned out not to be a decent man, and the daughter scolded that she did not tell about everything in due time. A couple of months later, Selena gave birth to a baby girl in a regional maternity hospital. The young woman named her daughter Angelica. This name Selena liked from the fact that she had a favorite movie, Angelica Marquise of Angels, where the main character was named Angelica. From the maternity hospital, she was greeted by her parents. They were happy that they were now grandparents. The elderly couple congratulated their daughter on the birth of the child and thanked the girl for giving them a granddaughter. Time flowed on. Selena happily babysat her child. The parents of the young woman were reveling, watching how their daughter carefully treats her child. Selena in her own time saw how her mother and father also cherished their only granddaughter. When Angelica turned 3, Selena and her mother had a confidential conversation. Lucy started the conversation. "Daughter, you've abandoned the institute. Maybe you'll go to the city. I'm talking about the fact that here you don't even look at men and you need to organize your personal life. There are more guys in town and maybe you'll find your soulmate there. Leave your granddaughter to us. Me and Grandpa will look after her and we won't hurt her. Mom, if I go to town, I'm going with my daughter. I can't leave my baby. And I'm not going there to look for a man, but because the wages there are higher than in our village. I can get a job as a nurse with my incomplete higher education. Angelica, I will arrange a kindergarten. She needs to communicate with peers. You understand this? And you yourself," replied the young woman. "All right, daughter, let it be as you say. We really don't want to part with our granddaughter, and with you too. But it is important for me and my father that you arrange your personal life," said Lucy. 2 weeks after this conversation, Selena left with Angelica in the nearest town, where she rented a one-room apartment. and then got a job as a nurse in the clinic. Her daughter arranged a kindergarten. The young woman began to live an independent life again. She often called her parents and informed them about Angelica's achievements in kindergarten. The girl was satisfied with everything that she had going on in her life. 3 years flew by, and then Selena's father died suddenly from a heart attack. The young woman urgently went to the village for Billy's funeral. As soon as she entered her father's house, her mother threw herself into her arms and sobbed. Selena was horrified when she saw how old and gray her mother had become. And after all, the young woman had seen Lucy only a month ago when she had come to visit with Angelica. Selena had been on vacation at the time. The widow wrapped her arms around her daughter and wailed, "How could he leave me? How am I going to live without him?" "Hush, Mommy. I understand you perfectly well. It's very hard for me too, because my daddy has left, but we have to hold on." "Be strong, Mommy," barely holding back tears, quietly said Selena. But Lucy, as if did not hear her daughter and continued to sob tearfully. Selena, worried about her mom's condition, rushed to the kitchen for sedative drops. And only after drinking the medicine the elderly woman was able to calm down a little. And then followed the funeral, which was attended by many people who spoke only good words about the deceased. The villagers respected Billy, as they respected him for his good disposition and readiness to always come to help in a difficult moment. Selena listened to the villagers and cried quietly, for now her father would never hug her or say a kind word to her again. 2 days passed after the funeral, and Lucy could not come to her senses that her husband was no longer in this world. The old woman would get up in the morning and call her deceased spouse to breakfast. She would say, "Billy, you're pushing the pillow again. Come on, get up. The pancakes are getting cold. You like them hot." Selena listened with a shudder as her mother addressed her late father. The young woman realized that she could not leave her mother in such a state. Selena turned to a neighbor for help and asked her to look after Lucy while she quit her job in the city and came to her father's house. And just a week later, the young woman has already returned to the village. Upon arrival, Selena saw that her mother realized that her spouse was no longer in the world of the living. However, from this, Lucy did not get better. She sat all the time and looked at the picture of her late husband and did not want to communicate with anyone. Selena tried to rouse her mom, but she was unsuccessful. A month passed after Billy's funeral, during which time Selena got a job at the clinic and was preparing to send her daughter to school, to the 1st grade. And Lucy continued to pine for her dead husband. Selena saw that her mother was fading from day to day, and somewhere in her heart, she realized that her mother would not last that long. And the girl was right. Lucy, after the departure of her beloved husband from life, survived him for only 3 months and then quietly passed away in her sleep. Selena was in a trance, as in 1 year she lost 2 relatives at once. And again there was a funeral, but here the young woman's composure had already left her. She sobbed to her heart's content as her mother's coffin was buried in the pit. Selena realized that now she was left in this life without the support of her parents, and she had to rely only on herself. Life flowed on in a measured manner. The young woman lived alone with her daughter. She devoted all her free time from work to Angelica. Selena wanted her daughter did not need anything, so she often spoiled her both with clothes and money for small expenses. Colleagues at work told the woman that she would thus grow a selfish personality out of the girl. However, Selena brushed it off and only said, "Your children have grandparents, and my daughter does not have them, so I can occasionally spoil my baby." Several years passed, and Selena still lived only for the sake of her daughter, not allowing men into her life who tried to court her. But one day everything changed when Angelica was 13 years old. In the village came a married couple who bought a small house here. The head of the family, Anthony, got a job at the polyclinic as a therapist, and his wife, Kathy, as a sales clerk. And it so happened that the nurse at the new doctor was Selena. Selena, as soon as she saw Anthony, immediately realized that she fell in love with this man at first sight. She tried to suppress this feeling in herself, since the man was married and had 2 children. However, the woman realized that her passion for this man was getting bigger and bigger every day. Selena did not know how to extinguish this feeling in herself. She did not yet know that Anthony also feels similar feelings for her. And one day, when the working day was already over, the man stopped her with the words, Selena, delay, I need to have a serious talk with you. The woman looked at the man in amazement, as he had never allowed himself to address her as you, and they had already been working together for the second month. Selena said quietly, "What kind of conversation, Anthony?" The man walked over to the woman and suddenly put his arm around her and said quietly, "Don't fool yourself and me. I know you are drawn to me just as I am drawn to you. I can't pretend every day that I don't care about you. Understand, I'm already afraid to call my spouse by your name." Selena was confused. She did not know what to answer at this moment, but only one thing she realized, that she did not want the man to let her out of his embrace. Anthony, as if he read her thoughts, and pressed her even tighter against him and began to kiss her face and neck gently. The woman made an effort and tried to slip out of the embrace with the words, "Don't, please. We shouldn't do this because you are a family man. I beg you to let me go." "Does the status of a married man hold you back to give in to your feelings?" said Anthony, his voice hoarse with excitement. These words seemed to sober Selena's mind, and she sharply punched the man in the chest with her fists, and then spoke. "Apparently, for you, fidelity to your wife is an empty concept. Yes, I won't deny that I'm attracted to you, but I'm not going to be a mistress, and let's agree to respect the chain of command. You're a doctor, I'm a nurse, nothing more." The man at these words sharply released the girl from his embrace and said, "Okay, as you say, but for me feelings are the most important, as well as loyalty, but you are right as I do. So do not do." With these words, Anthony left the office. Selena was left alone. She sat down on a chair and suddenly burst into tears. The woman did not understand how to behave towards her lover. She even had time to scold herself that she pushed away the beloved man. Selena returned home in a gloomy mood and thought about how to go to work tomorrow. She was afraid that if Anthony made such an attempt again, she wouldn't be able to resist and would just give herself to him. The next day, Selena arrived at work a little late, something she had never allowed herself to do. The woman glanced at Anthony, but he acted as if nothing had happened. He addressed her as you. Selena could not believe that only yesterday she was in his arms, and today, this man behaves towards her like an ordinary employee. The woman came home in a bad mood. She could barely contain herself from venting her anger on her daughter. Selena tried to force herself to think about something else, but not about her lover. Close to 8 in the evening, there was a knock at the woman's house. She was surprised, as she was not expecting anyone to visit, but nevertheless opened the door and looked at the guest with amazement. It was Anthony's spouse, Kathy, who asked permission to come in and talk. Selena invited the woman inside and immediately escorted her into the kitchen, where she asked, "What brings you to me?" "Do you have any idea?" said the guest, and looked at the lady of the house carefully. "To be honest, I have no idea what brought you to me," Selena said. "I admit it, but now I will explain everything to you. My husband is a decent man, and you know it as well as I do. Tolia told me that he can no longer live a duplicitous life. I don't understand you. And anyway, what does this have to do with me?" Selena asked incomprehensibly. "Don't interrupt, please." Anthony said that he couldn't live a duplicitous life because he loved you and he didn't want to deceive me anymore. "My husband has asked me to divorce him. You are not a stupid woman and realize that you have become the reason that my husband no longer wants to live with me," said the guest. "But I did not give him a reason," quietly said Selena. "Now I see that you have fallen in love with him too," said Kathy sadly. "What makes you think that?" the landlady asked. "Believe me, the look of a woman in love can never be confused with anything else. If you deny it, I shall have to think of you as a two-faced man. I did not come to you to quarrel, and you also understand it, as if I had come for that purpose, I would have raised a scandal from the first words on the threshold," said Anthony's wife. "Then why are you here?" asked Selena. "Honestly, I don't know. I love my husband, but if he loves you and you reciprocate, I won't stand in your way. But I will only have one request, that you don't stop Anthony from seeing our children," Kathy said quietly, and then got up and left the house. Selena was confused. She didn't expect this situation, just that she had been visited by the wife of the man she was crazy about, and this woman knew about her husband's passion, but she behaved in a noble way, did not make a scandal, but simply spoke out as a loving spouse, not thinking about herself. Selena felt uncomfortable. She wanted to hide in the shell like a snail. Now she did not understand how to behave in this situation, because in fact she did not give Anthony a reason that the man started any action, but at the same time the woman felt subconsciously guilty. Selena was able to do only one thing. She took a vacation at her own expense, citing poor health. And when she didn't go to work, she breathed a sigh of relief. She wanted to be alone with her thoughts. However, to stay alone with her daughter for a while she was not able to, because on the same day the woman was visited by Anthony in the evening, who spoke worriedly. "Why do I learn about your vacation from the head of the polyclinic and not from you? Are you seriously ill?" "No matter," quietly answered Selena, who was afraid to look at the interlocutor, as only his presence already, she had the desire to hug the man. "Are you out of your mind? How is it unimportant?" "I'm crazy with worry," muttered Anthony. "Your wife came to see me," said the lady of the house in a low voice, not noticing that she had switched to you. "And here's the thing, and you decided to hide? Do you think your horseback riding will help you?" The interlocutor said softly and then quickly stepped to Selena and embraced her, and then even more quietly added in her ear, "I need all of you, and you feel the same way about me. Once there in the office you told me that the role of mistress does not suit you, and I took this fact into account, because not for nothing my wife came to you. You understand perfectly well that for your sake, I'm leaving my family, and it doesn't matter whether you accept me or not, because I realize that I can't go to bed with my wife thinking about you. I'd rather live alone than cheat on my partner. Now it's up to you." Selena was stunned by this statement of the evening guest. She didn't know how to react to the man's words. The woman only knew one thing, that at this moment Anthony was speaking sincerely. This was evidenced by his gaze, which was directed directly into her eyes. And the man, taking advantage of Selena's confusion, gently kissed her on the lips. After this kiss, the woman uttered, "Leave now. Let me think about it." "Okay, I'll be back tomorrow, but for good. You can either open the door for me or not. It's your choice. Just know that I will come to you as a future husband. I will take the divorce in any case, and it will not depend on your decision, because it is my choice," Anthony said, and then left the house. Selena this night could not sleep for a long time. She pondered over the words of her favorite man. Now the woman did not doubt that her feelings were deceitful to Anthony. She realized that she loved him with all her heart. It was only towards morning that Selena fell asleep without making a decision. Anthony, as promised, came the next day with 2 bags. The man stood on the threshold and looked at the woman he loved. He was also worried that night, because he did not know what decision the chosen one would make. And when Selena opened the door for him, Anthony smiled happily. The couple understood everything with half a word. They knew that from now on they would live together. Selena was happy that in her life there was a favorite person, but the woman's daughter took the news with hostility. Angelica absolutely did not want a strange man to live in their house. She told her mother about it and asked her mom to kick Anthony out. Selena tried to explain to her daughter that she had the right to happiness and said that she would love Angelica as before. The girl said nothing in response. She held a grudge against her mother. 2 weeks passed. Anthony moved in with Selena. The man filed for divorce. The couple between themselves immediately decided that they would legalize their relationship without any publicity. They did not want to attract unnecessary attention from the villagers. However, the local population was already in full swing judging that the nurse stole the man from the family, and soon came home from school Angelica, who angrily threw her mother. "They look at me as an enemy of the people, and all because of you. You broke up the family and all the lumps go to me. I despise you for what you did. Daughter, you've got it all wrong. You have to realize that things happen in life. Just Anthony fell out of love with his wife. But it's not my fault," said the woman who was hurt by her daughter's words. Selena that same evening decided to talk to her lover on this topic. The woman turned to the chosen one when her daughter had already gone to bed. "I love you very much, but it will be difficult for us to live in this village, since the locals consider me a separator. I wouldn't say anything to you. If only I had been reprimanded, but Angelica got it today. Why don't we go into town for a while? I've been thinking about it. Don't think I'm thick-skinned and deaf. I understand perfectly well, and I've even taken some steps. In short, I'll take out a mortgage. We'll buy an apartment in the city and settle down." I don't worry about work, as doctors and nurses are needed everywhere. Selena looked at her lover extremely surprised. She expected everything, but not that the man is so attentive to the problems of her and her daughter. The woman could not hold back her tears and cried. Anthony pulled the chosen one to himself and quietly said, "And here about the tears we did not agree." After a while, Selena, along with her lover and her daughter, left the village. Anthony bought a 2-room apartment in the city. Now the man was burdened with a mortgage, but he did not care about this, since he was next to his favorite woman. Rejoiced at this event and Selena, who married Anthony. However, her delight was not shared by her daughter, who was dissatisfied with the changes in the life of her mother. Angelica, who at that time was already almost 14 years old in every possible way, wanted her mother to break up with her lover. At the new place of residence, the man got a job as a doctor in the hospital and the woman in the polyclinic as a nurse. Selena believed that now in her life came a white streak and she has no reason to fear the future. However, contrary to her dreams, everything went completely wrong. A year later, as she became a married woman, her daughter began to accuse Anthony that he is biased towards her. The girl accused her stepfather of the man raising his hand on her. Selena turned to her spouse with this issue. Anthony said with a smile, "What are you talking about? How can I offend your daughter? After all, I treat her like mine own." Selena looked at the chosen one and believed his words. However, the daughter again complained that the stepfather uses force and in proof showed a bruise on her arm. The woman was horrified. She could not believe that the beloved man could do this to Angelica. And she turned to Anthony again. The man this time said with irritation, "You let your daughter do too much. You can't do that. Don't you realize that Angelica is beginning to manipulate you?" "Such words I did not expect from you," said in tears woman. This was their first quarrel, and Angelica, having learned about it, happily rubbed her hands. She was dreaming about how to get rid of her stepfather. The girl could not, and herself to understand why she is so annoying mom's husband. After the scandal of the spouses passed 2 weeks, and as something Selena came from work found her daughter in tears. The woman rushed to comfort Angelica, asking about the reason for sobbing. Crying girl, seeing that her mother is worried, even more cried. The woman pressed her daughter tighter to herself and excitedly said, "My, you good girl, don't be silent. Tell me what happened to you. You can see that I am very worried about you. Who hurt you?" Angelica stopped sobbing and shouted hatefully to her mother, "Don't you guess? Your beloved Anthony is the one who hurt me." "What does Anthony have to do with it?" her mother asked, perplexed. "He has been harassing me for a long time, and today he did his black deed," said Angelica. "Do you mean that Anthony took you by force?" the mother said faintly. "Exactly so," answered the daughter and turned away from her mother. Selena could not believe what she had heard, but she had no reason to distrust Angelica. The woman said quietly to reassure her daughter, "We will punish him for this atrocity, put him in jail, but we will have to go to the police. Mommy, let's do without law enforcement, because it will be such a shame. Let's just throw this scoundrel out of our lives," said Angelica. "As you say, my dear," barely audible said Selena, who felt the taste of bitterness in her mouth. The woman stroked her daughter's head and went to the kitchen. She wanted to be alone at the moment. Selena sat down at the table, on which she placed her hands and then stared out the window. She wondered how she could be betrayed by the man she loved, for whom she was willing to do anything. The woman wanted to doubt her daughter's words, but then she remembered that recently she and her husband often quarreled because of Angelica. The only reason for the quarrel was that Selena let the girl do a lot of things. This night the woman did not sleep and sat in the kitchen. She had already made a decision for herself and waited for her husband from the night shift from work. Selena prayed to the heavens that her husband was not delayed in the hospital today. However, as a sin, her husband was not and was not. The woman woke up her daughter and hurried her to get ready for school. Soon the mother and Angelica left the apartment. Selena at this moment wanted only one thing: to take Angelica and go to the ends of the earth and forget about all this forever. Leaving the entrance, the woman kissed her daughter and wished her a good day. The girl headed in one direction and Selena in the opposite direction. Reaching the end of the house, the woman ran into her spouse. "Selena, without thinking, struck her husband on the cheek with the palm of her hand and said with indignation, "What a bastard you are! How could you do that to Angelica? She is still a child." "What happened?" Anthony, who was actually shocked by the situation, asked in astonishment. "You dared ask me that? Don't pretend to be an innocent sheep. If you don't want me in bed, you can use the services of night butterflies instead of harassing my daughter," the woman said angrily. "What's the matter with you this morning?" Anthony frowned, rubbing his cheek from the blow. "You took advantage of your daughter's innocence, and I will never forgive you for that. Be good enough to pack up your things and get out of the apartment before we get there. If you don't, I'll go to the police," the woman said harshly. "Are you completely crazy? Wake up, my dear. I never touched Angelica. She's just playing her own game and inventing all sorts of situations. Don't you notice it?" said the husband. "I told you everything," said the wife, and quickly walked towards the clinic, leaving Anthony at a loss. Selena could barely contain herself at work. So as not to be rude to patients, she felt extremely irritated. The woman could not stand it in the middle of the day and asked the manager to leave work. When she didn't get a refusal, she'd hurried home. The woman was worried that her daughter might come home from school before her and run into Anthony, and Selena didn't want that. As soon as the woman entered the apartment, she realized that Angelica had not yet returned from school. Selena breathed a sigh of relief, but immediately saw her husband coming out of the kitchen, who wanted to help his wife take off her coat. The woman squeamishly pushed his hands away and mouthed, "Don't you dare touch me, you disgust me. Why haven't you packed your things yet?" "I'm not going anywhere from here, as I have nowhere to go, and don't forget that I'm paying the mortgage for this place. But that's beside the point. Now we'll wait for Angelica and let her tell her whole story in front of me. I don't think my daughter will lie in front of me. If the girl confesses to the lie, we'll all just forget about it and never mention it again. I, for my part, promise that I will not remind about it," never said calmly Anthony. After her husband's words, the woman thought, and maybe her daughter had slandered her stepfather to get back at him for something. For this thought, Selena grasped as for a saving straw. She prayed to the heavens that Angelica and the truth of this whole situation just made up. However, the woman realized another thing, that the daughter to take revenge on her husband had nothing to do, as Anthony never scolded the girl. He could only claim to tell her mother, but no more. Soon Angelica came home from school, where she saw her stepfather, who was sitting in a chair. The girl wanted to go to the room, as she was stopped by Anthony, who asked to call her mother into the living room to talk. Angelica immediately realized that the conversation would be about yesterday's situation. She walked into the kitchen and pronounced to her mother, "This one wants to talk to you. I understand that we will discuss yesterday, and you will make me relive what happened." And at that moment, Anthony came into the kitchen, who heard the last words of the stepdaughter. The man approached the girl and softly said, "You are no longer an elementary school student and can be responsible for your actions. Let me ask you, what have I done to you that is so bad that you hate me so much? I love your mom and I love you too, but as a daughter, even though I'm not the biological father. So let me ask you why you slandered me. I didn't lie to my mom. You're the one who's spinning your wheels right now. I hate you with all my soul. You broke my life." The girl exclaimed and sobbed desperately. Her mother ran up to her at the same moment and began to console her, and then turned to her husband and said angrily, "Go away at once and don't come here again. I feel sorry for you, because now you have fallen for the words of your daughter, who is growing up to be a selfish and hypocritical person. Selena, I love you very much, but I'm not going anywhere because I have nowhere to go, and I told you so," gloomily said the man. "I heard you. I'll ask you to stay at the hospital for a couple of days while I solve the issue of accommodation." "Please do as I ask," the woman said. "Whatever you say. I'm sorry about your daughter. She has chosen the wrong life path for herself," said the man. Soon Anthony left the apartment, and Selena began to concentrate on what she should do next. Angelica looked at her mother as she rubbed her temples with her hands. The girl asked her mother where they would go now. Selena walked over to her daughter and hugged her. The woman promised that within 2 days she would find a solution. Selena bought a newspaper with advertisements at a stall in the evening of the same day. The woman decided to rent a studio apartment to move out of Anthony's. When Angelica found out about it, she was indignant and said, Why'd we have to move out? Let him go. That's how he'll be punished for what he's done. My dear girl, we can't do that to this man because he really has nowhere to go. But you and I have a house in the village. But we will stay in the city and will rent an apartment, said the mother. A day later, Selena and her daughter moved into a one-room apartment in another neighborhood. She saw her husband only on the day of departure. She handed him the keys and told him that she herself would file for divorce. Anthony gloomily looked at the woman he loved and could not say anything, and when Selena was already leaving the apartment, he quietly said, "Remember what I'm going to tell you now. I was ready to do anything for you when we met and now, but I can't prove that I did anything wrong to Angelica. Just know that I loved you and I love you, and I really hope that your daughter realizes what a grave mistake she made in divorcing two people. I know that you love me too." Selena felt her heart squeeze inside after those words. The woman felt tears flowing down her cheeks. She abruptly left the apartment and slammed the door behind her. Selena hated herself at that moment as she continued to love this man no matter what. Angelica and her mother had already been renting a place for about 2 weeks. Selena filed for divorce. It was hard for her to do, but she realized that there could be no going back to the past as it would be a betrayal to her daughter. Anthony during this time several times came to his wife to work in the clinic. He tried to return the wife with his stepdaughter to himself, but the woman was adamant in her decision. However, each visit of the spouse gave her unbearable pain because this man she loved with all her heart. And Selena, in order to no longer meet with her lover, quit the clinic and went to work in a kindergarten as a nurse. After a while, the couple divorced, and Selena began to live together with her daughter in a rented apartment. The woman strongly experienced the breakup with Anthony. She even changed her SATIM card so that her favorite person could not call her. Selena, after a couple of months, as they began to live together with their daughter, realized that the salary is not enough. And then Angelica also began to ask for more money for pocket money. The girl told her mother, "I am like a beggar. Everyone in the class in the cafeteria can buy something delicious, and I have to either buy the cheapest or beg from classmates a few dollars. I'm already ashamed of it, daughter, but realize that I already save on what I can. I have to adjust to this life," said the woman sadly. Selena understood, on the one hand, her girl, as her child was slowly growing up, and Angelica wanted to look no worse than her peers. But on the other hand, Selena realized that she could not jump above herself, and then she came to the decision that it is necessary to find a part-time job. And the woman got a job washing 3 entrances in a high-rise building. Half a year passed as Selena and Angelica lived independently. The woman tried to deny herself everything so that her daughter had all the best. However, Angelica every day became more and more demanding in her request, and one day the girl told her mother, "I want a rabbit coat like my friend Catherine, but only white. We can't afford it. If only to take a loan," said the mother. "So what's the matter? Take it. I'm your only child," said the girl. Selena did not contradict her daughter and bought her daughter's rabbit coat in installments. The woman admired Angelica, who was looking at herself from head to toe in the mirror. Selena was pleased that she was able to please her girl, and Angelica, having evaluated her appearance, said, "Everything is fine. The coat sits on me perfectly, but only to her lack of elegant boots, because my old ones do not fit here. We'll have to wait for that, because we can't afford it at the moment," said my mother. "You tell Winter not to come, not me," said the girl, irritably and casually. "Go to Anthony. It's because of him that you and I are living in poverty." "Never. This man does not exist for me, and you know it very well," said the woman, although she said this to her daughter, but in fact she often longingly remembered her lover. "Mom, but I really need shoes. Look at me. I look like a scarecrow in old boots," tearfully said Angelica. "Okay, I'll think of something," said her mother. After this conversation, Selena looked at her wedding ring and decided to give it to the pawn shop to buy her daughter a new one. The woman did so and then handed the money to her daughter with the words, "Go pick out your own boots of your own choice." Time moved on unerringly. Soon Angelica graduated from school, and the mother asked her daughter where the girl was going to enter. The daughter's answer discouraged Selena. Angelica directly said that she was not going to enter anywhere this year, as she was very tired of studying at school. Then the woman noted that her daughter would have to get a job as they could use an extra penny. Angelica looked at her mother indignantly and said, "Are you crazy? No one has moms like moms, but I have one with a twist. I said in normal language that I want to rest from everything, and you chase me to work." Selena sighed after her daughter's answer and went to clean the floors in the entrance. The woman walked down the street and looked at the passing young people. She saw young people laughing carefree, and she suddenly stumbled and fell. The fault was not closed manhole on the sidewalk. Selena thought with horror how she did not fall there with her head. Passersby came to the woman's aid. People helped the woman to rise. As she stepped on her foot, involuntarily cried out in pain. A kind-hearted old lady called an ambulance. As it turned out later, Selena broke her leg in 2 places. The woman grudgingly wrinkled her nose, because now she would have to stay in the hospital for some time. She called her daughter and reported about the unpleasant incident. In response, Angelica scolded her mother for her absent-mindedness. Selena lay on the hospital bed and looked out the window, and then the door to the room opened and a man in a white coat entered. The woman looked at him and her heart raced as she saw Anthony. The man smiled cordially and approached the patient with the words, "I came to check on my ward who likes to jump into sewer manholes. How did you know I was here?" The woman said quietly, "I work here and saw you arrive, and you're still as beautiful as ever. If you only knew how much I miss you," the man said. "Stop this conversation. We have long ago put an end to our relationship, and you know for what reason. And please do not come to me again. You are not my doctor. I am treated by a surgeon, and you have a completely different specialty," said nervously Selena. "So Angelica still hasn't confessed. I'm sorry to hear that. Polushka, yes, take off your rose-colored glasses, because your daughter is selfish. I saw her a few months ago, and she asked me for money. She said you needed it for treatment, so I gave it to her. And then I asked for your address, but Angelica refused to give it to me," Anthony said quietly. "And you gave her the money? But I wasn't sick. It's a misunderstanding." "You're lying to me," said the woman, stunned. "Yes, I gave the money and said I didn't need to return it. Ask your daughter. And what reason do I have to lie to you?" Anthony said. "Go away and don't come near me again. And don't come near me, because you are only trouble in my life," said the woman with tears in her eyes. "All right, whatever you say. But if you know where to find me, I will wait for you, as I do not need another woman," Anthony said quietly and left the room. Selena, after her ex-husband had left, immediately called her daughter and asked her to tell her the truth about the money. Angelica responded by saying that she had never seen Anthony and had never asked him for money. Selena at that moment did not know who to believe. She asked her daughter to come to her. She promised to do it tomorrow, as she had other plans for today. Angelica came only 2 days later and brought her mother a box of juice and a couple of apple pies. Selena asked the question about her ex-spouse again. "Tell me honestly, did you see Anthony and took money from him?" "Don't start, Mom. Don't you believe your own daughter? If this man works in this hospital, I'll bring him here now and tell him that he is a dirty liar," the girl said haughtily. "Don't. I believe you. You better tell me how you manage without me. I know you don't like to cook, so you're probably eating dry food without me," the woman said affectionately. "Don't worry, I don't starve," answered her daughter. After a while, Selena was discharged. Angelica did not come to meet her mother from the hospital, although she promised. The woman took a cab and went home. When she approached the apartment, she tried to open the front door, but soon realized that the door was additionally closed on the other side with a latch. Selena was surprised by this and pressed the bell button. 5 minutes later, her daughter in her nightgown opened the door for her. Selena muttered, perplexed. "It's 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you're still asleep. You promised to meet me and you didn't show up. Mom, Austin and I were up all night, as it happens." "Come on in, I'll introduce you to him," the girl said. Selena silently went into the apartment and a young man came out to meet her, who hastily tucked his t-shirt into his sports pants. The woman immediately realized that this was the Austin her daughter had just told her about. The man did not hesitate to hold out his hand for an introduction and spoke. "My name is Austin. Nice to meet you, and my name is Selena," the woman said. "Mom, let's go to the kitchen. I need to talk to you seriously," said Angelica. The daughter and her mother went to the kitchen and Selena said in a quiet voice, "How do I understand you? Your mom was discharged from the hospital with a crutch and a cast, and you didn't even bother to meet me. I come home and see you in the company of a guy who just got up from our couch. I take it this young man has slept over several times and you're sleeping with him. Did you remember to tell him you're under 18? Stop talking nonsense. We live long ago in the 21st century and age does not matter. Especially you probably forgot that because of your husband I lost my innocence. Therefore, dear mother, do not lecture me snidely," said Angelica. "How can you talk to your mother?" Selena said. "Okay, Ma, let's not fight. Let's talk in a calm atmosphere. Austin is my fiancé, and as soon as I turn 18, we'll get married. But that's not what we're talking about right now. You said we have a house in the country, so I'm going to ask you to move out and leave us this apartment. The three of us will be crammed into a one-room apartment. As they say, you have to give way to the young, and you're not able to work at the moment. You will be in the village to do the garden, but only one thing I'd ask us to still help us with money, because you are paid sick leave," said Angelica. Selena looked at her daughter with surprise, who also looked at her mother questioningly. The pause dragged on, and Angelica couldn't stand it and turned to her mother. "Why are you only looking at me in silence? Say something. If you're against my proposal, then I'll still leave with Austin. We'll wander around in hospices or basements. Don't be ridiculous. Let all the news come to your senses," Selena said and continued. "And your Austin, he doesn't have a place to live? How old is he? Where does he work? How long have you two known each other? Is it really that important?" the girl said irritably. "Of course," said the woman. "Austin is from the village, but we don't want to go there. He's 27 years old, still looking for work. We've known each other for about 2 months. I just haven't told you anything about him. And now you answer my question. Do you agree to move to the village?" Angelica said. "And do I have a way out?" the woman said sadly. After talking to her daughter, Selena felt a residue on her soul. It seemed to her that her own daughter was just kicking her out of her life. The woman tried to push these unhappy thoughts away, but they came back again and again. After a few days, Selena went to her village. She took a promise from her daughter that she would at least call her every other day. Angelica assured her mother that she would. The woman left with a heavy heart because she had never been separated from her daughter for so long. Selena also instructed Austin to respect and appreciate Angelica and never, ever to hurt the girl. Soon Selena arrived at her village. She walked along the country road and wondered how the locals would treat her this time. The woman hoped that her fellow villagers had long forgotten about how she had stolen Anthony away from her family. However, Selena was mistaken because already approaching her house, she noticed 2 neighbors who lived across the street from her. As they pointed in her direction with their hand, and from their conversation she heard, "The shameless one is back." Selena hurriedly went into her home. She was unbearably hurt by the phrase. Now the woman was wondering if Anthony's ex-wife was living in the village with the children or not. About this, she could only find out from the villagers. Selena was very afraid to run into Anthony's ex-wife. The woman found out the answer to her question the next day when she went quietly to the store. On the way, she met a former classmate, Natalie, with whom she was on good terms. The friends talked to each other and Selena said, "You know all about me anyway, since I used to live here. Tell me if Kathy lives here. You know who I'm asking about." "You mean Anthony's ex-wife?" Natasha asked. "Yes," Selena answered. "No, she left with the kids 6 months later. Listen, let's sit on the bench and you can tell me about you and Angelica. I'm very interested." "And why are you alone without Anthony?" Natalie said. The 2 women sat down on a bench near the store and Selena told her classmate about her life. She said that she had separated from Anthony, lying about the reason for the divorce. Selena said that the reason for the breakup of the relationship was a divergence of life foundations. Natalie listened to her pal and at the end of it all she laughed and then mouthed off, "It's become a fashionable reason for divorce when they say that they didn't agree. Now our locals will talk about it, washing your bones. You'll be living without Anthony, which means you're separated. You're gonna have to keep your tail between your legs. By the way, until they take off your cast, you should walk less. I will come to you to help you with the household chores and to the store if you need to run." Thank you, Mitaka, and you are still as mischievous as ever. And so Selena began a new phase in her life where she lived alone. The woman suffered from loneliness. Her daughter had forgotten to call her, and Selena dialed Angelica herself to find out how she was doing. The girl answered that everything was fine and asked one question: when the money would be there. Selena promised that as soon as possible. Soon the woman's cast was removed. She quit her job in the city and tried to get a job in the village, but the clinic was fully staffed. Selena was horrified to realize that she was in a poor state with no means of livelihood. In the meantime, her daughter began to call more often and ask for money. Selena felt herself in a desperate situation. She did not know how to live now and on what exactly. And then the idea came to her that she could make baked goods and go to the highway to sell them. So Selena did it. She molded pies at night, and in the morning she fried them, and then got on a bicycle and rode to the highway where she sold pies. After just a month, she even had regular customers. The woman was happy that she found a way out of the situation. True, at the same time, Selena was very tired because they had to cook a lot and then fry. But the woman did not grumble at the fate. She thought that she would work like an ox, but she could help her daughter with money. A classmate saw Selena working hard and told her, "You're not feeling sorry for yourself. Look at what you've turned into. You look like an old lady. Let Angelica start making her own way instead of sitting on your neck. You're still a young woman and you've given up on yourself. Stop lecturing me. What do you propose to invite your daughter to this village? And what will she do here? Hear how I stole a man from his family. It's been years and the locals can't stop talking about it." "I'm amazed at evil people," Selena said. "You don't change the subject yourself. I'm telling you that it's time for Angelica to get a job and not to live a life of debauchery," Natalie said. It had been 6 months since Selena had moved to the village. The local woman only talked to Natalie and her friend. Selena was returning home after selling pies when her phone rang. She pulled out the receiver and saw it was her daughter calling. The woman answered, "Yes, my good one, how glad I am that you called. And I was just thinking about you. I want to make you happy today. I'll transfer money to you soon. My pie sale went really well. Why are you always transferring pennies to me? Mom, I have a favor to ask of you. Sell your house. I urgently need money," said Angelica. "Wait, daughter, what are you talking about? And where will I go to live then?" Perplexed woman said, "You know the way out. There are probably a lot of single men in the village, so marry someone," nonchalantly said the girl. "Are you all at home? What are you saying? How is it to take and marry the first man you meet?" Stunned asked Selena, and then added, "Your proposal is completely absurd, and I'm not even going to discuss it." The woman wanted to say something else, but her daughter disconnected the connection. Selena tried to call Angelica throughout the evening, but she persistently did not pick up the phone. The woman was upset by her daughter's behavior. She wanted to express her indignation to her daughter. The next day in the morning, the woman was going to go to sell pies again, but then there was a call from Angelica's boyfriend, who said gloomily that Selena should come to the city and deal with her daughter. The woman bewilderedly asked Austin what had happened. The young man replied that Angelica was going to Washington. Selena asked the boy, "Hold her back, I'm leaving for you today." However, the woman did not manage to get there, as she was hit by a car and was hospitalized in an unconscious state. Selena spent about 2 months in a coma. She could not recover for a long time. The woman desperately recalled past events, and when the doctor appeared, she asked him what had happened to her. The doctor explained that she had been hit by an SUV and then added, "You're just lucky. Apparently you were born with your shirt on, because you were practically pulled from the other side of the world. Tell me, did my daughter come to see me?" The woman asked a question. "As far as I know, only a young man came to you once. He left a phone number and asked you to call him back when you come to your senses." "I'll get the phone number of this visitor right away," said the man in the white coat. As soon as the doctor gave the woman the number, she asked him to call him from her phone and then give her the machine. The doctor complied with the patient's request, and soon Selena heard the voice of her daughter's fiancé. The woman asked Austin a question in a weak voice. "Where is Angelica?" "Let me come and tell you everything," the guy said. "Is she all right?" the woman asked. "Yes, I'll be there soon," and with these words, Austin disconnected the connection. After a while, the young man sat in the room next to Selena and quietly explained the situation. He told her that Angelica had checked out of the village and had gone to Washington. Austin had tried to detain the girl, but it was impossible. He told her that her mother was coming to them, but this circumstance did not stop Angelica. Then the guy took a quadruple folded piece of paper out of his sports pants pocket and handed it to the woman lying on the bed with the words, "This is the message Angelica asked me to give you." "Wait, Austin, how did you find me here?" Selena asked. "I got a call from the hospital asking if I knew Selena. I knew right away it was about you. I was contacted by the phone number that was listed in yours," answered the guy. "Why didn't you call Angelica?" Selena asked again. "She changed her phone number. I tried to call her repeatedly too, but with no results," muttered Austin. "Thank you for everything. Now please leave me alone. I want to be alone," the woman said in a low voice. Austin wished her a speedy recovery and then said goodbye and left the room. As soon as Selena was alone, she gently brought the note to her closed eyes. She stayed in that position for a few minutes and only then unfolded the message, which read, "Mommy, I know I have asked you for money quite often, and this time, when I offered to sell the house, I needed the money, but you just refused me and did not even try to find out why I needed the money, for which I resent you deeply. You betrayed me, the one I was hoping for. I'm going to Washington, and don't look for me, for I don't want to know you at all. Live and reign in your house, sell your miserable pies, and save your capital. I'll get along without you. I'll have a good life, not like you. You ask yourself, what have you given me in this life? I can answer that question for you. All I gave you was life. That's all. Other children were taken to the seaside as children, and I have never been there, but only listened to my classmates talking about their impressions and silently envied. I could accuse you of many things, but I'm not going to. I don't want to spoil my mood before I leave. I hope you can breathe easy without me now, because no one will ask you for money. I wish you a long life, and this is goodbye. Not your Angelica anymore." Selena reread the message several times and tears ran down her cheeks. The woman blamed herself for refusing to sell the house at that moment, and she also blamed herself for not really finding out where her daughter needed the money. Selena didn't know how to find Angelica. The woman carefully folded the message and kissed the paper several times before tucking the note under her pillow. Selena spent about another month in the hospital, and then she was discharged home. The woman went to the village with a cheerful mood. She hoped that suddenly she would come to the house, and there would be her favorite daughter. But the woman was disappointed. Angelica was not there. Selena sat down in the kitchen and wept bitterly. Only now she realized that her daughter had turned away from her forever. It took some time for the woman to calm down. She got up, walked through the rooms. The silence in the house just pressed on her, and the woman turned on the TV. However, even the announcer's speech didn't help her get rid of the feeling of loneliness. Selena decided to go to the store to buy bread. The woman got out and walked leisurely along the country road. She only met one villager along the way, and that pleased Selena as she didn't want to talk to anyone. When Selena approached the store, she saw two elderly women outside the store who looked at her with disdain. Selena walked past them in silence as she heard one old woman's voice in her back. "Fate has punished Selena. Her husband abandoned her. She is not lucky with her job. And she also fell under the wheels of a car, even in a coma was. And all this to her for the fact that she stole a man from a woman who has 2 children." Selena turned sharply to the women and said harshly, "You haven't said much about retribution. I could go on with your list. And the heavens punished me by turning my only daughter away from me. I can add that now after the accident on the road I am disabled. Now you can continue to wash my bones, and don't forget to tell others about my sorrows that heaven has sent me. I think you will feel better now that I have heard from you what a bad woman I am. All the best to you." After that, Selena went to the store and bought some bread and then went home. She felt a kind of relief when she expressed everything that was on her heart to these 2 old women. Now Selena thought about what she should do next. As she approached the house, she heard her name being called out. She turned around and saw Natalie hurrying towards her. Her friend walked up to Selena and said in a friendly manner, "It's good to see you in good health. How are you feeling?" "I'll be fine." "How did the villagers find out about the accident?" she said. "The police came here. They were asking about your relatives, and they told me about it. I take it that you have already been told that God has punished you. It was Mallory's grandmother. She's a mad woman with nothing better to do. Invite me over to your house and we can sit and talk, Natalie said. Selena waved her head in approval and the two women entered the house. Natalie took a chocolate roll out of the bag and put it on the table. Let's have a tea party despite all enemies. Selena looked at her former classmate and patted her on the shoulder, then stared at her pal in surprise. The guest was confused and asked, "Why are you looking at me like that? Like I'm a ghost?" "You are in a position," quietly muttered the mistress of the house. "How do you know about it?" "I just found out about it today. Even my husband has not yet begun to inform," stunned said friend. "I touched you and felt the life inside you," confused said Selena. "What are you talking about?" "I was intrigued," Natalie said, and then added, "You've already learned about me. Now tell me what you're going to do." "I want to sell this house and move to a smaller village. I'm not going to be able to live here with Dunca's grandmothers. They'll look at me with hatred, and that's very stressful. So I'll sell the house and move to another village, where I'll start my life with a new leaf. I just have no other option," quietly said the woman. "You know, I approve of your decision. Maybe there you will meet a man and start a family. I'm glad you haven't given up. But you need to put yourself in order. I already told you that you don't look your age because of all your worries," said the woman. "We'll figure it out. And now let's drink tea with your roll," said the lady of the house. 2 months after the conversation with Natalie, Selena sold her house and moved to another village where she bought a small house. The woman led a reclusive lifestyle. She did not get close to anyone. Her only interlocutors were the cat, Pushak, which she picked up on the street, and the mongrel, Mulia. Selena lived on the state disability allowance, and she also made preparations for winter with vegetables collected from her vegetable garden. The woman had long been accustomed to loneliness and was glad that she had changed her place of residence, because here she was least reminded that her own daughter had abandoned her. 13 years flew by unnoticed. Selena had long since ignored the fact that she was considered a bit out of place in the village. And also the woman got used to the fact that some of the villagers called her a strange old woman behind her eyes. She was informed about it by a neighbor's 6-year-old boy, who accidentally threw his ball into her yard. That's when she met him. He knocked on the wicket, and the woman opened it with the words, "What brings you to me, young man? I've got a ball to you." "And actually, I'm not a young man, but a boy," said the boy. "And this boy has a name." With a smile, said Selena. "Yes, my name is Sam, and many people call you a strange old lady." "Why?" asked the boy. The woman smiled and thought about how to tell the boy that she was not an old lady at all, but that all the experiences in her own life had turned her into a haggard old woman. Selena was silent for a while, and then she spoke. "All people become old at some point, and it's my time to be an old person." "That's not what I asked, but why are you strange?" Sam said. "Maybe it's because I don't socialize much, and people like that are always considered strange," the woman said. "So my mom is weird too, because she's always at home and never goes out," the boy concluded and voiced it out loud. "Wait, what's wrong with your mom?" asked worriedly mistress of the house. "I do not know, but she often faints. Here is standing, and then bang and fainted sadly," said the boy. "Come on, let's go see your mom," said Selena. She didn't know why she said it. Sam and his new acquaintance went to his house. Selena entered the hut and the boy escorted her to the bedroom where 30-year-old Anna was lying. The lady of the house looked at her guest with surprise. At her guest. Meanwhile, Selena approached the woman lying there and put her palm on her forehead. Anna wanted to resent the visitor's action, but she couldn't because a pleasant languor spread over her body. Selena stood in that position for a few minutes and then spoke, removing her palm from her forehead. "Come to me in the evening. I'll help you cure your ailment." "Are you a witch doctor?" Anna asked in surprise. "No, I just feel that I can help you. So why don't I do it?" answered the guest and left. That evening, a neighbor knocked on Selena's door. Anna entered the hut and walked into the living room. The landlady invited the young woman to sit down and asked her to tell her about her illness. Anna said that after the birth of Sam, she began to faint, constantly heard tinnitus in the ears, as well as flies in front of the eyes. Doctors diagnosed anemia, prescribed various drugs, but they can't cure it, and because of this, Anna said that she can't go to work and sits at home all the time. Selena listened to the visitor, then came up and again put her palm to the forehead of the young woman. The landlady whispered something in a language she didn't understand. This went on for about 10 minutes, then Selena removed her hand and said, "Here are my recommendations. If you want to get rid of this ailment, then squeeze out the juice of one beet, carrot, and apple. All this is thoroughly mixed and bring to me, and then I will tell you what you need to do." 2 days later, Anna appeared again at the neighbor's house. The visitor brought the juice of the said ingredients and held it out to the mistress of the house. Selena mixed all the juices and then asked Anna to come the next day in the morning. And so the neighbor is once again at the elderly woman's house. Selena holds out the vegetable and fruit juice to Anna and says, "You will rub this on your forehead every day, morning and evening, for a week. Some of the symptoms will disappear, but not all at once. Then you'll take a break and make fresh juice." "Is this really going to help me?" the young woman said confusedly, and then added, "How can I thank you?" "Cure yourself, and that will be your gratitude," said Selena. About 2 weeks passed, and Anna noticed that she was actually feeling better. The young woman shared this news with the villagers, and literally at once to Selena's house began to come to the locals, who asked the woman to help get rid of this or that ailment. Selena looked at the people and said that she would not be able to help everyone, as she was not a magician, but she would try. On the first day, Selena saw only 3 people, giving them instructions on how to proceed. The residents thanked the witch doctor and tried to pay, but the landlady refused to help them financially. A few days later, the whole village knew about the old woman's gift, and a queue of locals lined up outside her house, among them a young woman, a stranger, who was holding a dying baby girl in her arms. The mother was fanning the girl's face and praying to God that she could get to her appointment with the witch doctor in time. Selena was visited by Anna, who now often visited the mistress of the house, even when she was in the middle of an appointment. And this time Anna came when Selena was seeing an elderly man and said at once, "There is a mother with a child in her arms, waiting for her hour to get to you. I feel so sorry for the child. You can see it's on fire. So why are you standing there? Go and bring this woman without a line," Selena said sternly. And soon the mother entered the house with the baby in her arms. The guest looked at Selena and gave a silent gasp. At this yell, the lady of the house looked back, who was holding a vial of liquid. The older woman glanced at her visitor and the vial immediately fell from her hands and shattered. Selena took a step back and with a pale expression on her face said, "This can't be. Angelica, my girl. Mother dear, I'm sorry for everything, but just help me now. My daughter is dying. I did not even think that the witch doctor was you," with tears in her eyes said the girl. "This is my granddaughter?" Hoarse from excitement voice mumbled Selena. "Yes, Mom. Please help her. All the doctors can't help us. I only have hope in you," Angelica said, sobbing. Selena quickly ordered her daughter to put the girl on the bed and touched her granddaughter's forehead. The woman mumbled something over the little girl's head. Angelica looked at her mother and mentally prayed to God that her mother could help her. After about 10 minutes, Selena removed her palm from the girl's forehead and spoke softly. "You got here just in time. Another 3 or 4 days and the little girl would have been gone. I will do everything in my power, but we must pray to the Lord God, as only in His hands are lives. Now get the cabbage out of the fridge and tear off a few leaves to give to me." Selena got the cabbage leaves and put them on the baby's forehead and whispered something again. The woman sat near the child for about 20 minutes, her lips uttering incomprehensible words. Only after that the lady of the house got up and came to her daughter and said that the baby would recover, but it would take time. Angelica, as soon as she heard this, knelt down in front of her mother and sobbing began to beg for forgiveness. Selena stood silent. She too was crying and stroking her daughter's head. This scene was watched by Anna, who could not hold back her tears. The neighbor understood that something had happened in the fate of these women, and it was obvious that mother and daughter had not seen each other for a long time. As soon as the first emotions passed, Selena turned to Anna. "Anna, can I ask you to tell people that I am not in a position to receive anyone else today? Apologize for me, please." "Of course, I will come to you tomorrow," Anna said and left the house. As soon as the door closed behind the neighbor, the women threw themselves into each other's arms. Angelica was the first to speak. "Mom, please forgive me. I do not know how to beg your forgiveness. I brought you so much grief in life that I need a lifetime now repent. Calm down, my dear girl, and tell me what happened to you over the years. Don't worry about your daughter. We'll get her back on her feet. What's her name, by the way?" Selena said. "Daisy," still crying, said the girl. "What a beautiful name," the woman said thoughtfully. "Mommy, I'm going to have a lot to tell you. I'm really very guilty before you, but I swore not only to myself, but also to one other person, that I would confess everything to you. The thing is, I needed money to invest in Stan's business. He was a man from Washington, and I fell in love with him. He invited me to the Capitol, but he asked me for money, so I came to you. But I was turned down, and I'm glad you didn't go through with it. So Stan and I went to live in Washington, D.C. I thought I'd be happy with him, but it turned out to be much more simple than that. I became his plaything in bed and his housekeeper during the day. I couldn't go home to you because of my pride, so I put up with it. After a while, I found out I was pregnant as soon as I informed Stan, but he pointed me to the door or come to get rid of the baby. I made the choice to bring the baby girl into the world. That's when I went to your place while still pregnant, but there were strangers living in our house who didn't know where the previous owner of the property had gone. I was confused. I didn't know what to do. I ended up going to a hostel, and I was grateful to Stan for my baby girl and for giving me the opportunity to learn eyelash extensions. I ended up staying at the hostel and working part-time at eyelash extensions. Soon Daisy was born, and I was over the moon to be a mom. That's when I realized how much I hurt you. When Daisy was 1.5 years old, I gave her to the kindergarten. I needed money to exist, so I got a job in a beauty salon. At that time, I thought that now I will be fine. The only thing that mattered was that I could not find you. However, my happiness was short-lived, as my daughter fell ill at the age of 3. I will not tell you about the disease itself. You are a medical professional and you will understand everything. In general, it is related to the right kidney. We practically spent a year in hospitals, but the doctors didn't know what to do. And then I turned to your ex-husband out of desperation. Here Angelica stopped talking and looked at her mother, who shuddered like an electric shock. Selena looked affectionately at her daughter and asked her to continue. Angelica flooded with tears and said quietly, "Mommy, forgive me, but your ex-spouse is a very good man and is not guilty of anything. I slandered him then. He didn't take me by force, and I also really borrowed money from him, citing your illness, and I also said that you have a fiancé to him. You can curse me, you have the right to do so. Calm down, my girl. It's already in the past. Do not torment yourself with guilt, because you know time cannot go back. The main thing, you were able to confess everything, and this is worth a lot. Life has also given you a test, and you pass it with dignity. I mean about the illness of this daughter, that you did not give up, and continued to fight quietly," said Selena, and then added, "Please continue your story. I went to Anthony and told him everything, and I apologized for slandering him. He forgave me, and then he asked for you, and I told him that I had hurt you badly and we were lost. And you know, Mom, he still loves you. He's living a pauper's life. I promised him that if I found you, I'd confess everything. Uncle Tolia told me that there is an old woman who performs miracles. He was informed about it by a patient. But we didn't know your name, and I didn't suppose that this sorceress would be you," my mother said, Angelica. For a few minutes, the daughter and mother were silent and looked at each other. Then they heard a child's voice calling her mother. Angelica was the first to jump up to Daisy, followed by her grandmother. Selena asked her daughter to bring fresh cabbage leaves. The girl complied with her mother's request. The mistress of the house took the shriveled leaves off the girl's forehead and put fresh ones on them, whispering to her again. Angelica watched her mother's actions with excitement. After a while, Selena moved away from Daisy and said, "Granddaughter will now sleep for about 2-3 hours. Sleep is the best medicine for her right now. Daughter, tell me, how is Anthony?" The landlady said quietly. "He lives alone, has a dog, still works at the hospital." "Why do I call them now and you two can talk?" the girl exclaimed. "Don't. It's all in the past. Look at me. They call me an old woman in the village, and I'm not even 60. Anthony will still have a woman, as he is a caring family man. Let's not talk about it anymore. You call him and tell him that everything will be fine with your daughter, but do not say a word about the fact that you found me," Selena said faintly. "Whatever you say, Mom. But now I have a question. Where did you get the gift of healing?" asked the young woman. Selena smiled at her daughter and told her, "Austin called me and told me that you were going to Washington, and I went to warn you against a reckless act. But then I got hit by a car, and then I was a coma. And that's when I learned that I could feel pain, emotions, if I touched them with the palm of my hand. But I did not use this gift because I wanted to be a hermit. It was easier for me to be alone. But then a neighbor boy told about his mother, who often faints, and I decided to find out if I could help her or not. It turned out that I could, and then word of mouth got around. That's my whole story about witchcraft." "This is some kind of mysticism with you," adventured thoughtfully, said the daughter. After the girl went out into the yard and secretly called Anthony, Angelica told the man everything despite her mother's request. The former spouse asked the girl not to talk about this call and said that he would soon come to the village. The man also took Selena's daughter's word that she would not tell and about his arrival. Angelica laughed in response and promised that she would keep quiet about everything. Just 2 days later, there was a late-night knock at the door of the witch doctor's house. Selena furrowed her eyebrows and said angrily, "Who has brought you here at night?" And with these words, she went to open the door. As soon as she opened the door, she saw a huge bouquet of scarlet roses and a man's silhouette behind it. The mistress of the house did not see who was standing behind the flowers, so she spoke sternly. "What kind of jokes? I do not accept visitors at this time." "You'll have to make an exception, my sweet berry," said the guest. The woman fell into a stupor as this voice she would have recognized from 1,000. It was the voice of her ex-husband. Selena grabbed the joint and barely audibly mumbled, "Anthony." "Yes, it's me, and now you can't get rid of me," the witch doctor happily said the man, and threw the flowers aside and drew the woman to him and then kissed her on the lips. Selena cried, and Anthony whispered softly in her ear, "Calm down, sweetheart. We are together now, and nothing will ever separate us again. I am grateful to your daughter for telling you and me everything. We will spend this century together in this village, as I have applied for dismissal, and I am going to live here with you. I'll leave the city apartment to Angelica and her daughter. And don't you dare cross me. I'm going to take your place as head of the family. I don't think you're against that." "I agree," Selena said happily. Dina often thought that her future was predetermined in advance. Some people are given everything by fate, although they seem to do nothing special for it. And others struggle like a fish against the ice all their lives, and small, hard-won successes are replaced by a series of failures, disappointments, and sometimes even real disasters. Dina's family lived in the village. Her mother, a young graduate of the village school, on the night of graduation was abused by drunken scumbags, her former classmates. Anna was the prettiest girl in the school. For the festive evening, she was made a lush blue dress. In the morning, it was left in rags, and Anna wanted to kill herself. The first person to see her was the principal, Victor. He stayed at the school until the last. A solemn dinner for the boys was served in the canteen. Then there were, of course, dances. At the end, all went to meet the dawn, and only then Victor parted with the graduates. It was like a sign that they were already adults and did not need supervision. And the headmaster walked around the empty school, turned off the lights, and went home. He lived quite far from the school, at the other end of the village. He had a car, but he didn't use it very often, unless he needed to go to town. But the bicycle became a faithful friend, because Victor was still young. He had recently turned 30, and now he was pedaling, enjoying the morning coolness, admiring the early dawn. He was already not far from his home when he heard in a small forest, "Damn this American maple tree," growing into a real jungle, heard a quiet and bitter cry. A thin voice was crying, either a child or a girl. Victor jumped off his bike, realizing at once that there was trouble. 2 bitter sobs came to him, and yet he hadn't expected this. Anna was sitting on the grass with her arms around her knees in a tattered dress. Her hair was disheveled, her face dirty and bloody, her nose broken. Anechka was shaking, and never before had Victor heard such desperate, hopeless crying. The principal sat down next to the graduate. No one would ever know what they had whispered about at that dawn hour. It was only in the morning that the three scoundrels met in the latrine. Alexander, an alcoholic, lived on the edge of the village. He was about 50 years old, and he was called the paratrooper in the village, because when he got drunk, he told everyone that he had once served in the airborne troops, and he was almost sent to Afghanistan, where he would undoubtedly show everyone. And when saying goodbye, Alexander would raise his palm to his temple and say, "I have the honor." So Alexander lived in the middle of nowhere in the hut. And in the cesspool, up to their necks in filth, sat sober guys. On the edge of the pit stood Alexander and Victor. Alexander had a rifle because, among other things, he was an avid hunter. And from time to time, he pointed the barrels at one of the guys and commanded, "Dive, I shoot." And indeed, he fired his double-barreled shotgun just over the heads, and to stay alive, you had to dive into the slop. When this trio had already lost their human appearance, Victor ordered, "Go home, pack your things, and get out of the village. Forever." In a good way, it would have been necessary to call the police, to start an investigation, to have expert examinations, and a trial, and a term. But Anna begged not to make the case public. She prayed to God that no one would know what had happened to her to avoid shame. So the two men went on a lynching spree. The rapists were never seen in the village again, but somehow the village found out what had happened. Alexander swore it wasn't him who blabbed it. He wouldn't have told anyone even if he was drunk. Most likely, the boys shared it with their relatives before they left. On the one hand, their relatives should have been grateful that the punishment was limited to only a shameful bath in filth. And that the punishment had been fair, too, no one could deny. Anna had always been characterized by modesty. No one would dare to say that she was to blame for what had happened. On the other hand, the parents of the boys definitely lost their sons forever. After all, it was impossible for them to return. Victor warned that in this case, prison would be inevitable. But even though the scumbags had been punished, Anna still didn't want to live. Her faith in people, in her future, everything was trampled, and then the villagers had to aghast. Victor married his former student. It all happened so quickly. He proposed, she agreed. Instead of a wedding, they just signed in the registry office. No parties, no guests. And it also happened that Anna got pregnant almost immediately and gave birth to a daughter prematurely. Dina went to her father. It was visible to the naked eye. Strangers noticed how she resembled Victor. But the villagers believed that the girl was the daughter of one of those guys who had raped her mother. Anna asked her husband to make an examination, but he refused flatly. "I do not want to go on the silly women to prove something to them," he said. "Besides, even if you reproduce the certificate that I am the father of Dina in 100 copies and hang in every house on the wall, people will talk their way. That's the way they like it. Just ignore it. Get over it." Victor did what he could for his young wife. Under his supervision, Anna graduated from the pedagogical college by correspondence, began to work at school as a teacher of primary grades, and they had a nice house, and in the garden they both liked to work. And on a long teacher's vacation, they went to the sea with their little daughter. And no one said anything to them in the eyes of either Anna or Victor. In front of them, all pretended that they had long forgotten this story. But when Dina started to grow up, she realized that people remember everything. A friend told her about what happened to her mother. For Dina, it was a great shock, but the sensitive girl understood her mother better not to question, not to cause her additional pain. Dina also noticed that parents forbid their children to be friends with her. She is fattened. Bad heredity. The director is bringing up someone else's child. The girl will grow up like her real father, drinking and walking, she heard behind her back. And although Victor loved his daughter, but it could not overshadow the unfriendly alienation of others. By the time Dina had finished school, her family had 2 more sons, and no one had any doubts about them. And Dina realized now that she was back on her feet, she had to leave. Her mother was like a stone wall behind her father, and she herself had no place in this village, where every family's ancestry was known to the 10th knee. Here neither to study, nor to marry, nor to live. Nothing is possible. And after the graduation party, Dina packed up and left for the city. Parents found it natural to study further, but the girl hid her plans from them. Institute is, of course, wonderful, but she wanted to get on her feet as soon as possible. So she took a hairdressing course, And at the same time, she found a job in the park riding horses for children. The girl who grew up in the countryside knew how to take care of horses, to put babies on them, to lead them under the reins in a circle. She knew how to take care of horses. She was not afraid of them, and she was taken to this place without a second thought. They paid a little, but her parents sent her enough to rent a room and live very frugally. In her dreams, she had already planned her life. She would finish the courses and get a job in a salon. Surely, the earnings will be higher there. First of all, Dinah'll get her hand in, as they say. Secondly, if she saved every penny, she would be able to buy everything she needed to open her own hairdressing salon. Then Dinah planned to go to the district center. There it will be possible to rent premises inexpensively. Masters barbers in the area is in short supply. The work will always be. And parents are nearby. You can visit them always when you miss them. Dinah did not think about marriage yet. It seemed to her that she still had everything ahead of her, and it was necessary to get on her feet first. The girls she knew were having affairs, living with one boy or another, but they rarely invited her to weddings. Unless one of her friends realized that she was pregnant, and then the young people applied. The rest of us wanted to be young enough to do this and that. Travel the world, build a career, fall in love more than once, and just did not bury themselves in a maelstrom of domestic responsibilities. But as they say, man assumes and God disposes. In the park, on the same site with Dinah, John began to work, and the girl herself did not notice how they became friends, and then closer relations. Apparently, Dinah very much lacked mental warmth. Having left her family so early, she felt lonely in a foreign city. Next to John, everything became different. The young man had his own apartment, let only one and not in a prestigious neighborhood, but it was still a home. And John gladly shared it with Dinah. He also offered the girl to sign. Now the two of them would come to the park in the early morning and work on the horses. John was a veterinary paramedic, and Dinah learned a lot from him. The summer flashed by unnoticed. At the end of August, the young people registered their marriage. Dinah thought about inviting her parents to the wedding, even if it was a modest one, but John talked her out of it. They decided to set the table at home and invite their closest friends. That nowhere to hurry, that no one made them remarks. However, it was not possible to avoid it. John's friends smoked at midnight and talked loudly in the stairwell, so that the neighbor flew out to scandalize. But in general, the evening was successful, and most importantly, they managed to save a lot of money. John persuaded Dinah to quit her job and finish her courses in peace. All the same, it would soon be fall. There would be fewer visitors in the park, and he could manage alone. Dinah hesitated to earn money, at least some independence, and so she would be completely dependent on her husband. But fate decided for her. Dinah realized she was pregnant. From her friends, she knew that in many cases you can work until the maternity leave. But this was not her option. First of all, she could not get any maternity pay at such a job. Secondly, she began to feel nauseous from the smell of the stables, dizzy, and her eyes darkened. For a short period of time, Dinah was admitted to the hospital and was discharged with a recommendation to treat herself as a fragile crystal vase. More rest, no heavy loads, walks in the fresh air, fruits and vegetables in the diet. With the onset of fall, John also began to bring in less money than in the summer. He began to look for part-time work, went to calls, treated animals at home if the cases were uncomplicated. And with Dinah, he began to quarrel. When John returned, he'd stop at the store for groceries. He liked to save money, and he was a virtuoso at it. Dinah knew that with such a husband you will not stay hungry. He will make soup from an axe. She used to like it, but now she often realized that she could not bring herself to eat this or that dish. Pea soup and oatmeal and boiled cube fritters disgusted her. John, on the other hand, was angry that his wife had turned into a sissy and could not be pleased. One day, Dinah asked for chocolate ice cream. That day, she was feeling particularly unwell, lying on the sofa, trying to move as little as possible. She wanted to eat, but she felt the only thing her body could take was popsicles. John, on the other hand, had brought her the cheapest dairy ice cream in a waffle cup. Dinah cried out in frustration, and her husband freaked out. "I'm sick of you," he shouted, throwing a plate with the ill-fated ice cream at his wife. "You lie like a cow all day long, doing nothing, and you owe everyone." We know how resentful and unstable women are when they are expecting a child. Dina sobbed and couldn't stop. The hour was late and the room was alone. John had nowhere to go, and he couldn't hear the crying any longer. He rushed over to Dina and started banging her head against the table, repeating, "Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up." She was silent from pain and fear, only hiccuping softly. That time she forgave her husband, but John must have realized that it was okay to raise his wife's hand. And the next time she provoked his irritation, he simply pushed Dina away so that she flew across the room and hit her thigh painfully against the corner of the table. A huge bruise blossomed on her leg. "What are you doing?" Dina asked bitterly. "You can't hit me now." "Oh, come on." John's voice sounded contemptuous. "Who's hitting you? You'll drive anyone crazy." The next time he raised his hand at her, Dina tried to fight back, and such quarrels, ending in violence, began to happen between them more and more often. Dina tried to go to her friends, complain to them. They consoled her, advising her to leave John, to leave without looking back. "Where would I go?" Dina asked. "I don't have a place to live. Go back to my parents? Without a husband, pregnant, you can't imagine what kind of life awaits me there. Everyone will point fingers. It's the 21st century in the city, and such cases are normal, and there I'll just lock myself up and stay at home." There was no one among her friends who could take Dina in. One had her own family, the second lived with her parents, the third rented an apartment. "I'll be patient," Dina sighed. "Maybe when the baby is born, everything will change." But Dina's baby was not destined to be born. The pregnancy was terminated prematurely. It wasn't John's fault directly. Dina was home alone when she got sick. Then the ambulance, the hospital, and the loss of the baby. The doctors were comforting. "You're still so young, 18 years old. Take a year off, then you'll get pregnant, give birth, and everything will be fine." John did not come to pick up his wife from the hospital. He was working that day. And when he came home, Dina realized that there was no compassion on his part. He didn't see anything special in what had happened. It was probably for the best, he thought. "And we do not need a child now," he summarized. "The apartment is small. There is no extra penny. When you get a specialty, go to work, then we'll see." In her heart, Dina hoped that her husband had learned a lesson from what had happened. All this could not fail to impress him. And if next time he raised his hand on her, everything could end even more tragically. But as it turned out, the husband hadn't made any conclusions. And if Dina annoyed him in any way, he'd get itchy fists. And this was a time when a young woman needed to come to her senses in every sense. The medics would speculate about hormones. The psychiatrists would hint at depression. And the first big fight had tragic consequences. It was Friday night. John in his dreams imagined a set table, some kind of appetizer, and most importantly, plenty of beer. And after that, having come to a relaxed state, it would be possible to watch a good action movie and then look and fall asleep to it. In the morning, he told his wife that he would organize a feast in the evening. The weather was very bad, dreary rain and cold and rain. We should do something to make ourselves happy. But when he got home, the refrigerator was empty. As they say in a popular TV show, it was empty of mayonnaise and iron bars. "Why haven't you gone to the store yet?" He was furious with his wife. "I did," Dinah tried to explain. "Only not to the store. I paid the rent. And then I had a headache today, so I went to the drugstore and got some medicine. The pennies don't work for me. I took the cheapest one that was effective. But there's still no money left. There's a packet of pasta. I didn't cook it for you. It's 15 minutes and I'll serve it hot. There'll be macaroni and cheese with melted cheese. Like in Italy." "Like in Italy, you say? I'm supposed to eat my rent receipts with cheese on them. And take your pills for dessert. Go borrow money from whoever you want, and you can pay it back with whatever you want. It's not my fault that you earn so little." Dinah tried to snap at me. "So lift your sirloin from the couch and go to work." John finally got furious. "You're nobody here, and you're not a good hostess, and you can't take care of yourself, and you couldn't even be a mother." Dinah burst into tears, and John grabbed her hair so hard he almost scalped her. "Stop whining. I can't listen to you howl anymore. You howl and howl all day long. What the hell do I need you for?" Dina ran out into the entryway and sat in a corner under the stairs until late at night. It was dark and cold, but no one could see her, and she could cry until she was exhausted. It was good that the door of the house was unlocked. The young woman crept in when John was asleep. But that dark, bitter evening changed something in Dina. The next day, she went to her parents' house. They greeted her kindly, but she noticed that the family had already adjusted to life without her. The younger brothers were studying. Her mother and father had their own affairs and worries. They told Dina about them, but they were their own affairs and concerns, not hers. What they knew about their daughter was that she had married and moved in with her husband. Dina did not go into details, so as not to upset the people closest to her, and she hid everything about her health, too. She saw that her father and mother were doing well, and her mother said that Dina's brother had already started dating a girl. He would bring her home. A new family would be formed, and there would be grandchildren. Dina nodded, realizing that she should be happy, but her heart was bitterly bitter. It was as if she was all alone in the world. This time, she especially tenderly said goodbye to her relatives, hugged each of them and told them that she loved them. And she added to herself, "I'm sorry if it was my fault." When she got home, she waited until John went to work, gathered all the pills she had in the house, poured them into the guest room, and drank them with milk from the bottle. Dina purposely didn't lock the door from the inside, so no one would have to break it down. That's what saved her. 2 women knocked. They needed to read the meter. The door was ajar. The women entered, calling the owners, and saw Dina lying on the floor. The ambulance took the young woman to the hospital, but for several more days, doctors could not give a guarantee of a favorable outcome. The risk was too great that Dina, even if she survived, would never fully recover. This time John was really scared, maybe not so much for his wife, but for himself if he was blamed for her death. He called Dina's parents, and the first thing the young woman saw when she came to her senses was her father and mother crying. The father looked very old, and the mother felt immensely guilty. Anna did not leave her daughter at first because Dina felt very bad. She was covered with hallucinations as soon as she took her head off the pillow, began to dizzy, and so that the young woman covered with attacks of nausea. Dina forgot many words and could hardly remember them. Sometimes she replaced some words with other words that did not fit the meaning at all, and many everyday skills were erased from her memory. Her mother had to teach her how to eat with a spoon, how to dress herself. Trying to give her daughter back some mental strength, her mother told her about the path she herself had traveled. "I didn't want to live either," she said, "after what those scumbags did to me. And if it hadn't been for your father, who knows if I would be alive now or if I would have killed myself. Mom, can't you tell me the truth? Not for other people, not for Dad, just for me. I need to know, is Daddy he really my father? Tell me the truth." I didn't doubt it for a second. Anna answered firmly, "I would be afraid to go to any expertise. Look in the mirror, you have the same eyes and pride. Neither you nor he can't stand to be pitied. You used to bump little, I reach out to stroke, soothe, blow on the sore spot, and you quickly crawl away somewhere under the table, say, 'Do not touch me.' That's the only way you calm down if you were left alone. Dad's the same way." And Victor asked his daughter, "Tell me, is John to blame for what happened? Did you do it because of him? Just give me a hint and I'll deal with him." "You're gonna put him in the latrine again." Dinah sighed tiredly. "No, I just need to pull myself together and take responsibility for my life." "Maybe you'll come home?" Dad asked hopefully. Dinah could not admit that her parents' house had never become her home. Maybe if, when the tragedy happened to her mother, her father had not decided to stay in the same village, against all odds, but had taken the young mother to a place where no one knew them, everything would have gone differently. But her mother had already got used to the rumors and gossip, or maybe they had died down with time. Anyway, she was happy with her fate. Dina, on the other hand, realized that she had to start all over again. Fortunately, the head doctor called somewhere, and Dina, after discharge, was taken for another month in the psychoneurological dispensary. She liked it there. In the hospital, the nurses told her off, as if she was the only one to blame for everything. But here, where the same sorrowful souls like Dina gathered, it was impossible. Dinah came here in the early morning. It was cold and freezing outside, But here it was warm and calm, as if in a kindergarten. The patients were given breakfast, which necessarily included some kind of sweets, chocolate-covered cookies, marshmallows. One could pour hot water from the cooler and make tea. Then the women gathered in the recreation room. There were a lot of live plants in tubs, palm trees in tubs, windowsills filled with flowers, green branches hanging along the walls from elegant catch pots. Here even equipped a mini zoo corner, mysteriously glowing blue crystal aquarium, chirping, and trills of canaries. All this was relaxing and soothing. The nurse invited the patients for injections. Having received their share of antidepressants, some women were going home to their husbands and children. Others went to their rooms to rest. Dina almost always used this right and stayed in the dispensary until the medical staff went home. The head doctor talked to her and found that Dina had good prospects for a full recovery. "How are you progressing in your course of study?" he asked. "I've neglected everything," she said with a guilty smile. "You understand. Marriage, failed pregnancy, then all this." The doctor looked at her without judgment, but with sympathy. "Yes, there are circumstances in life that force us to abandon our plans. But in your case, it's a temporary measure. You realize you're young and you need to get a profession. Your depression is too closely related to low grades. You subconsciously realize that you deserve better treatment from your husband, a better life than the one you are living now. But at the same time, your mind says no specialty, no income, so you have to put up with what she is now. And this contradiction drives you into a maelstrom of longing and hopelessness." "I understand," Dinah said quietly. "Yes, you're right. I'll try to finish my studies. I'll recover." "Good." The doctor was smiling now. "In 3 weeks, your treatment will be over. Try to control yourself. If you feel the same condition as before, be sure to contact a specialist. We can help you. But don't experiment with any more medications. You've already been miraculously pulled from the dead. Tell me, do you regret what you did?" "I regret it," Dinah said, just to say something. In fact, in her heart, she wasn't sure at all. She had to start from scratch again, and she had so little strength. If it ended the way she had planned, she wouldn't have to worry about anything else. "I'll prescribe you some more drugs." The doctor sketched out a prescription. "But take them carefully. The effect is cumulative." Dina came home calm. She cooked a simple dinner and went to bed early. John was on his best behavior. He didn't try to yell at her, didn't try to get handsy, or maybe she saw everything through a haze. After all, she'd been sedated so much. Dina left the dispensary with great regret. Now she was losing this quiet harbor where she used to spend the whole day. She decided to call her parents tomorrow and ask them to lend her some money when she finished the course, started working, and paid it all back. Dina was sure that John would not give her money for her studies. The longer they lived together, the more his greed increased. In his mind, Dina should be busy with housework, must show miracles of economy and not demand a lot. Maybe he subconsciously realized that she found a good place to live, earned more than he did. She would run away from the kind of life he had arranged for her. Dana decided to call home in the evening so her parents would be home, but she didn't have time. Victor reached his daughter himself. "Mom's dead," he said. Dina slowly sank down on the bed. She realized that her father was broken. Usually, no matter what was going on in the family, he held his ground. On the contrary, all his appearance tried to show that nothing terrible had happened, calmed those around him. And if he had a little bit of self-control, he would never have told her such news without preparation. But I guess he didn't have the mental strength left. "What happened?" That's all she asked. "Diabetes," her father sobbed. Dina had never seen him cry before. "Mom had diabetes?" she asked, shocked. "Yes, can you imagine? And she hid it from everyone. Only the nurse at our hospital knew, and my mom. And then she went to a neighbor who was seeing her son off to the army. I don't know what she ate and drank. I was sent to a teacher's conference. I wasn't home for a few days. And my mom, apparently, ran out of medicine, and she, such a fool, did not call an ambulance. The guys came back late, thought she was asleep. And in the morning they looked in. My father cried, no longer hiding. "I'll come," said Dina. "Today it's late. Nothing goes. Tomorrow morning. Come. The funeral's the day after tomorrow. I know the women are busy. They'll do everything. You don't have to worry about anything. But just stay with me, okay? And stay with your mom. I know she loved you more than any of the kids. I can't be, Dinah said in shock. I mean, she must have heard from all sides that I wasn't your daughter. But Anna and I knew the truth. She, on the contrary, thought that she ruined your life, that she failed to protect you from gossip, that maybe you were afraid of her. You didn't want to live in the same house. That's why she let you go to town. But she had a hard time with it. I'll come, Dinah repeated, crying. Tomorrow on the first flight. Dad, you hang in there. Her native village, though it had a bus connection with the city, but only 3 times a day there was a shuttle bus, and it was packed to the brim. But Dinah had no luck at all. The next day, after a short thaw, there was a terrible ice, and the flights were canceled altogether. Girl, how am I going to get there? Dinah asked the cashier at the bus station. The question was purely rhetorical. It was clear that the cashier could not help her. I have to go to a funeral, Dinah added, hoping for nothing in her heart. The cashier shrugged her shoulders. Call a cab. Maybe someone will agree to go. I can imagine how many accidents there will be today and how many people won't be able to get to work. It's the first time I've ever seen ice like this. Dinah thought it must be even worse in their village. Here at least the janitors sprinkle sand on the roads. And there on the village streets and alleys, they probably have a clean skating rink. It was possible to call a cab on a mobile app, but Dinah decided to walk down the street to a small square. It was also the bus terminus, and cab drivers always hung out there. She wouldn't have enough money if she took a private cab. She didn't know if he charged double in this weather. What do we do then? Dinah's only valuables are a gold wedding ring and a cell phone. To get to her parents' house, she was ready to give both. Immersed in her thoughts, Dinah lost for a moment the caution, the collectedness of her body, which is necessary when walking on a slippery path. She fell, instinctively putting out her hand for support, and hissed in pain, hitting herself very hard. She was not immediately able to move her arm. In the classic stories, the girl necessarily twists her leg. Immediately a knight is announced, who in his arms carries her to the bus stop, to the house, to the doctor. Substitute the necessary version. It doesn't say anything about an arm, but Dinah's arm was whimpering in a bad way, and she tried to keep it in balance and not to move it. God forbid she should fall on the same right hand again. Where the cab drivers always crowded in, there were only 2 cars this time. When Dinah reached them and named the village she needed to get to urgently, one driver refused flatly. What are you doing, girl? I don't know how to drive people around the city, and you have to go so far away. The roads are like glass there now. The second cab driver named the price exactly as much money as Dinah had in her purse. She'd have to borrow money from her father for the return trip. But Dinah was still happy to the point of tears, if one can be happy when rushing to her mother's funeral. Please, she pleaded, let's try to get there. The guy signaled to get into the car. Dinah grasped the handle with her right hand and cried out in pain. What's wrong with you? She fell unluckily, she grimaced, trying to hide the pain. Dinah was getting comfortable on the seat when the cab driver turned around and asked, Did you break your arm? No, I guess not, she answered uncertainly. I wouldn't be able to move my fingers. That's not necessary. Which one? The right one? Dinah held out her hand, and he quickly and skillfully probed it, almost painlessly. Let's go to the trauma center to get an x-ray, he said firmly. No. Dinah almost shrieked. She didn't have the money to make another detour to the hospital, and there would probably be a waiting list. All she needed now was to get to her mother and father. You're not a doctor, she said. How would you know? In general, I work in the Ministry of Emergency Situations, admitted the cab driver. I also know how to render first aid, and I really don't like your hand. Dinah was so exhausted, so worried, that she told this stranger everything. That she was in a hurry to go to her mother's funeral and that the most important thing for her was to get there, and that there was nothing to do in the village with a plastered hand. She would have to help there. I would put on a tight bandage and do some light work. She was so worried that she didn't notice where they were going, and when she saw that the car was entering the medical center, she caught up. I don't have any extra money, I told you. She sounded desperate. I'm asking you for money? The cab driver didn't even turn around. Do you have your passport with you? Of course. They might ask you for it. He drove her not to the traumatology, but to the largest surgical building where, as he said, he had his own people. And indeed, he soon came back for her and led her through the corridors to the X-ray room, where an old lab technician quickly took pictures. She asked Dina for her passport and policy. The latter, of course, was not with her. Dina's companion took the still wet scans and quickly walked down the corridor. He came back about 10 minutes later. 3 doctors told me that there is a fracture, he said. Now they will put a cast on your... Don't. I know where I'm going. There's so much to do. A leg brace. No. Bandage. All right. Don't mind. Jacob will do it now. Half an hour later, the car was once more carefully making its way through the icy streets, and Dina's companion Nikita was talking. Just be careful with this hand, at least a month, until the bones do not start to stick together. Thanks to you. They discreetly switched to you, and for the painkiller shot you asked for me, thank you. Put something cold on it at night. The pain subsided, the car was warm, and Dina didn't notice how she dozed off. It was as if her mental and physical sufferings had let her go for a short time. Lucy sang softly, something about paradise, and Dina slept so soundly, and with such vivid dreams as in her childhood. She woke up when Anthony gently tapped her on the shoulder. The car was parked at the entrance to her village. Where to next? Oh, Dina perked up, brushed back her disheveled hair. To the end of this street, and then I'll show you. She saw from afar that the gate of her house was open and people were coming out. Until then, she hadn't fully believed her mom was gone. But now she realized that everything her father had said was true. There was the coffin lid, leaning against the wall. Dina cried. Thank you so much. She unzipped her purse, took out her wallet, scooped all the money out of it. Fuck you, Anthony said. I mean, that's not what I wanted. You hang in there. I'll give you my phone number. Call me. Tell me when to pick you up. Thank you, Dina said with one lip. Carefully got out of the car and staggered towards the house. She had never cried as much as she had in those moments when she had clung to her father. And he too had cried with her. He had never thought that Anna, whom he had treated all his life not only as his wife, but also as his child, would be the first to leave, and he, an old man, would be left to live. Dina only hastily hugged her brothers, noting with an edge of consciousness how they had grown up. The house was bustling. There were no ritual agencies here, and as in former years they prepared to see off the deceased from home and set the tables for the wake in the school canteen, the whole village wanted to say goodbye to their teacher. There was simply not enough room at home. At night, Victor and Dina did not sleep. They sat in the big room. Anna's face was as calm as if she were asleep, and it was as if she was present. She knew that your life was hard, Victor said, that you were taking care of her, that you didn't tell her everything, but she felt everything, and she took it very personally. Daddy, you're not saying she got worse, that her illness worsened because of me. No, my daughter. She was just hiding it from all of us. I guess it runs in the family, the good things to share and the bad things to suffer alone. It's not right. The people closest to her would have helped her. Dina's arm ached terribly, but she was crying because of another pain. Will you come back to us? Victor asked. I don't know, Dina answered faintly. Mom would be happy if you lived in this house again. Dimka is going to get married too. Dimka? No matter how tired Dina was, she still couldn't help being surprised. She still considered the eldest of her brothers a child. What can you take from that brat? Who? Natalie, remember? Dina was speechless. Natalie's mother was the most scandalous woman in the village, and she had many children. How many nerves did she put on the nerves of teachers who were supposedly prejudiced against her children? And Natalie was a troublemaker whom no one wanted to be friends with. She threatened to complain to her mother if she did something wrong. And then Angelica came to school and organized another showdown, bringing the children and even the teachers to tears. One of the young teachers who had the honor of teaching Natalie quit her job. Angelica called her every night and pissed her off. Good thing it was only figuratively. It could have been literally. Was he crazy? Dina asked, referring to her brother. I'm telling you, he's an asshole, and Natalie's pregnant. It was a judgment. Don't get married around here. Stone Sr. will burn the house down and dance on the ashes. They've been saying for years that she was out of her mind. Did Mom know about this? Of course she knew, Victor sighed. She said she'd let the young people live with us. I couldn't go to that quarrelsome woman. Only before dawn, when there was no strength to speak and cry, Dinah fell asleep on the sofa. Even if she managed to get a couple of hours of sleep, it gave her strength to endure the next day. At the funeral and wake, almost all the women cried. Anna was loved here, but Dinah's memory was haunted by something someone had said. Poor Katie, her life had been a mess from the start. That her youth had been ruined by those bastards, that God had given her a short life. And no grandchildren. Dinah realized that people haven't forgotten anything, and her mother's story would be passed down from generation to generation, and people would talk about her. Oh, that Dinah, who knows who was born of the trio that mocked Katie. Dinah went to her home, not knowing how long she'd stay. But the day after the funeral, she noticed that Natalie had practically moved in. Where would she live now? One room was occupied by the young couple, the other by her father and younger brother Steve. Dinah was left with the largest pass-through room where she would always be in plain sight. Natalie didn't hide her pregnancy. Every now and then she emphasized that she could eat this and that she couldn't. It seemed to Dinah that wherever she went, she ran into Natalie. "Will you stay until 9 days?" Natalie asked Dinah. "Maybe longer." "I thought you got married. Did you? Or are you just living with someone?" Dinah was used to such unceremonious questions. She didn't feel well. Her arm was always in sharp pain. She wanted to sleep. Her appetite was gone. To top it all off, after watching Natalie and comparing some facts, Dinah bought a test at a drugstore that had recently opened in the village. She realized that she was expecting a baby too. Everyone in the house was already asleep, and she sat on the sofa, not moving, looking at one point, as if she was thinking about something. And then she went and erased Anthony's number from her phone. Who is he? A casual acquaintance. Thank him so much for all the good he's done her, but she can't owe him much. Dinah can't pay him back. When 9 days had passed, had dinner, trying not to wrinkle her nose at the smell of herring, Dinah said, "I'm leaving tomorrow." She heard Natalie sigh with relief. Was her father genuinely upset? "Why don't you want to stay?" Dinah had to remind herself to pull herself together. "I have my own family, Dad," she said softly. "I can't leave it. John's waiting, worried." Though in her heart she trembled, not knowing what would greet her at home. It wouldn't take much for her husband to beat her to a pulp again. "I think I'll tell you what. We should contact his parents. Maybe they'll do something about the son, or she could stay with them until the baby's born." She had an address for her father-in-law and mother-in-law somewhere. "I remember they were very sorry that Dinah lost the baby that time. Let them help keep it alive, and maybe even raise it." At dawn, when Dinah was getting ready, trying not to wake anyone, the first bus left at 6 o'clock. Her father went into the kitchen and handed her a bank card. "What's this?" Dinah asked in surprise. "Mother's been saving for you. It's kind of like her inheritance. No one but me and her knew about the money. You see how it's all working out. I know you. You're not gonna get a penny out of it. Well, at least don't give it up. Take it, Dinah, and it'll be easier for Mom where she is now." It didn't take much for Dinah to start crying like a little girl again. "Come on, I'll walk you out." Her father picked up her bag. "God knows when I'll see you now, and if I'll see you at all." When Dinah returned to her husband, it became obvious that the tragic event in the family had left a big imprint on her. She became very silent and quiet. She used her mother's money to finish a hairdressing course and put the rest of the money into an account. Earlier, when her husband attacked her, she tried to defend herself, to fight back, but now she avoided any confrontation. She did not talk to John herself, only answered his questions. Trying to gain experience, wrote an ad that the novice master goes to pensioners at home, cuts and does styling for free. She began to have her own clientele. At home, Dinah moved like a shadow. Sometimes John even forgot about her presence. He would look, and his wife was at home sitting in a corner sewing something. But the young woman couldn't help thinking about what would happen when the baby was born. She remembered how noisy and restless her younger brothers had been as babies. John would freak out if the baby didn't let him sleep. With the rest of the money she had, she could rent an apartment and live, but Dinah had a reason for not touching that amount. Her pregnancy was going smoothly, as the doctor had said, and John was behaving more or less normally, except for the occasional push aside if she was in his way, or the occasional slap on the wrist as if in jest. Dina mentioned this to one of her clients, an old woman from the third floor, Aunt Anna, and suddenly she heard it from her. A woman who allows to raise her hand should be beaten 3 times a day, in the morning, at lunch, and in the evening, to make her realize that such an attitude cannot be tolerated. When the deadline approached, Dina asked the doctor to put her in the hospital in advance, and he agreed. It was just a vacation to spend time with the girls in the ward, to listen to their stories, napping whenever she wanted and eating 3 meals a day. 3 days after Dina was admitted to the hospital, son Mickey was born, and if earlier John didn't visit his wife, saying that he didn't have time, the doctors were there. They would do everything that was necessary. But now, after the birth of the heir, he began to come, and even brought Dinah transfers bought in the store expensive ham juices. At his stinginess, it was a clear indicator of good attitude. Now at night, Dina wondered what made her husband the way he was. Maybe his parents saved every penny and beat their son for no reason at all. And often she thought of Anthony, who in her mind could never be cruel. Lucky for the girl who's gonna be his wife. When Dina was discharged, she saw that her husband had prepared nothing for the baby. Before the birth, she had not spoken to him on the subject for fear of another scandal. But now she dared to ask the question. What about the crib, the stroller, the bathtub? She listed the essentials, fearing that any increase in expenses would cause an explosion of anger. But John was unexpectedly peaceful. He slapped his palm on his forehead. "Though, it slipped my mind. Let's go, let's buy. But what about, who will we leave him for?" Dinah nodded at Mickey, who was still lying on the sofa. "You're right. All right, write me a list of things to take." The rest of the day passed quietly. John brought a crib and a bathtub, and he said that a friend had promised to give him a stroller, which was almost new in their family. Dina made dinner, and she even had a thought that it might be possible to rebuild the family again like this, brick by brick. It was the kind of peaceful evenings that would make a life. But at night, Mickey began to cry and could not calm down. Dina carried him in her arms. She was still very weak after childbirth, and she was desperate for sleep. But she could see that her husband was not happy, demonstrably turning from side to side, trying to cover his head with a pillow. "Listen, go somewhere with him," finally. John couldn't stand it. Dina looked around confused, where to go in a one-room apartment. Even if they hid in the bathroom or kitchen, the baby's cries would be audible. "Go to the stairwell. It's cold there." Dina couldn't stand it, and the neighbors will start jumping out, asking what's wrong. "Do you care if the neighbors get a good night's sleep, or do I? I have to work tomorrow, by the way. His yelling is giving me a headache. I'll be on my feet all day tomorrow too." Dinah tried to talk some sense into her husband. "It's a time like this, you have to be patient for a few weeks, then the little one will sleep better." "A few weeks?" John's eyes widened. "What do you mean, a few weeks? Me coming to work like a zombie? You're home when you want to go to bed. I doubt I'll be able to lie down tomorrow, and babysitting all day is hard work too." "Oh, don't give me that. I have a responsibility to people. Don't compare." Then Mickey, sensing the tension in the air, shouted particularly loudly, and John shrieked, "Shut him up, or I'll shut him up myself." Dina had an all too good idea of what might come next. She instantly wrapped the baby in a blanket and sprinted out onto the stairs, forgetting to dress herself. The young woman was well aware that the baby's crying would wake the tenants, so she went downstairs and walked for about an hour in the yard until the baby fell asleep. She froze herself, but it was more frightening to go up to the apartment. It wasn't until the middle of the night that she gently put Mickey in his crib. John had long since fallen asleep. Dina lay on the edge of the couch, but she couldn't sleep. What's to be done? She thought with despair. It will only get worse from here. A couple of days later, the father-in-law and mother-in-law came to see their grandson. They were simple country people. Dina felt that they treated her well, and they liked the baby very much. "Matey, Aunt Matey," sighed, rocking Mickey. "It's a pity we'll go away and not see him grow up. And let us stay with you for a while," Dina begged. "The son is too small, interferes with John's sleep. He gets angry." The mother-in-law looked at John. "It's normal for a baby to cry. He'll stop crying." "He cries half the night," John said glumly. I'm already walking around like a zombie." Aunt Luba's voice was strangely reproachful. "Your wife has spoiled you. It's Dina who has a hard time with you, not the other way around. Try to please her. Come with us, my daughter. It's true we don't have special conditions, but we raised our own, and we'll raise yours somehow." Uncle Stepan nodded in agreement. When they began to pack for the road, Dina quickly packed her few things. "Don't take too much from here," Uncle Stepan advised. "I'll make Mickey a snake," and he didn't fail. The old people's house was small, but they welcomed Dina warmly. They gave her the bigger room, the brighter one with the windows facing the street. On the same day, they hung a snake in the corner, and Dina had only to rock her son. Whether it was the fresh country air or the fact that his mother stopped being nervous, the baby began to cry much less. However, life was not easy for Dina. She grew up in a house where there were conveniences, but here there was no need to think about it. Water in the column on the street, you have to heat the stove to run to the small wooden box. The bathhouse was heated once a week, and if it was necessary to wash during a break, a basin and a ladle would help. Firewood was also saved, and in the mornings the hut was not just fresh, but even cold. Dina took Mickey to bed with her, afraid that he might not freeze. John, who had seldom come to see his old folks before, did not come more often now that his wife and son lived here. "He was taking a vacation from us," Dina joked, but there was bitterness in her tone. But she didn't want to go back to her husband either. Month after month passed, and she still lived in that little house. There was bad news from her family. Her father had had a stroke. The loss of his wife had not been in vain. Doctors reassured that with good care, Victor would live and maybe even recover. But will there be good care? Dinka married Natasha. She gave birth to a daughter, and now they all lived in their parents' house. Not only that, but Natasha's scandalous mother, Angelica, moved here too, allegedly to take care of the sick, but Dina strongly doubted that was the case. Stone's house was just the same as Aunt Luba's, and the woman wanted to move to better conditions and feel like a mistress. Dina's younger brother could not stand such a neighborhood, and having finished the 9th grade, left school and entered an agricultural college with a dormitory. Dina realized that she could not live in the same house with Natasha and her mother. By nature, she was not capable of scandals, but these two women would give her a paradise life. They don't care why Dina and John live apart. Rumors will spread throughout the village that poor Anna's daughter has gone down a bad path and had a child by God knows who, the apple of the tree, and so on and so forth. Sometimes it's the smallest thing that can bring you out of your daze. One morning, Dina was cleaning the house. She was wiping the mirror, and suddenly she looked at herself with strange eyes. Painfully thin, cheeks sunken, hair hanging in icicles, a dirty stain on her cheek. The day before, the electricity had been cut off in the village, which often happened, and we had to cook not on the electric stove, but in the oven. And my head hadn't been washed for a week. The clothes are old, worn out. It's a pitiful sight. If I live like this, I'll soon get to the point where they'll start giving me change near the church, Dinah thought in despair. But soon anger joined the despair. She had to do something to fight it. She called a girl she'd been friends with before. "Len, help me out. Can't you find me a cheaper place to rent? And yes, Mickey might need a nanny for a few hours a day." To her surprise, her friend was able to arrange both. The very next day, she told her that her neighbor downstairs worked in the north and would be happy to have the apartment looked after and pay the rent. Angelica was also reassuring about the nanny. She has an acquaintance, Alexander, who will not refuse to help. The girl is very short-sighted. After school, she couldn't go anywhere, or rather she started and dropped out. She is just looking for such a job as a nanny, and it's cheap. Well, dead or gone, thought Dina. It's scary to go into an unknown voyage, but only in the swamp to drown even scarier. She bade her father-in-law and mother-in-law a very warm farewell. They sheltered her in such a difficult time, were shy for her and her grandson's sake, shared everything they had. Thanks to this respite, Dinah came to her senses, and now she has the strength to move on. She owed them a great debt of gratitude and would try to repay them someday. Dina felt an unusual sense of lightness as she closed the door of the city apartment behind her. It was all up to her now. and it was much easier to rely on someone who was not trustworthy. She hadn't informed John of her arrival. The next day, she called the city's hairdressing salons and wrote down a few addresses and was invited for an interview. Dina was afraid she wouldn't get hired anywhere, but she was wrong. She was offered two options. One was closer to home, but the other had a higher salary. After talking to Alexander and making sure that she could trust her, Dina chose the higher salary. Yes, it wasn't easy for her, but compared to her previous situation, it all seemed like nothing. Dina tried to show herself as responsible as possible at work, and the landlady was pleased with her. From work, Dina ran home to take over the duty from Alexander. But the girl often stayed with her late. They had dinner together and chatted about life. So Dina had a new friend. Alexander, and indeed was shallow, but as for housework, everything she had argued, and Dina was happy to return to a warm, cozy house. Alexander was not lazy to clean up and cook. Mickey sleeps a lot. She waved her off when Dina began to thank her. What else should I do? Not to read books. The landlady had a good library, but Alexander could not think of reading without horror. She would turn on the TV, find a show, and start vacuuming. Dina tried to compensate her assistant's diligence with money, and both were satisfied. Victor was slowly recovering from his stroke and getting back on his feet. Unfriendly to everyone and scandalous Angelica became attached to him and took care of him, though roughly but diligently. When Dina called her brother, he reported that her father was doing well. Dina did not think about such a concept as a personal life. Enough. She'd had more than enough of her marriage. John learned from his parents that Dina and her son moved to the city, but where the old people could not say. Dina hadn't left them an address. She proceeded from the fact that the house is someone else's, and she has no right to invite anyone here. But John didn't make much of an effort to find them. It was as if he thought they would show up on their own. Dina, in turn, decided that if her husband asked for a divorce, she would give it at the same second. Let another woman suffer with him if she wanted. In a year, Dina had so much experience in the hairdresser's shop, so much ability and tact in dealing with customers that the landlady did not hesitate to entrust her with the most capricious and wealthy clients. And everyone went away satisfied. And then the young woman withdrew the rest of the money from her book, added to it the money she had saved, and rented a room. Now she was her own boss, and again it was necessary to appreciate every penny, because soon the owner of the apartment would return from her north, which meant that Dina would have to look for a place to live. Merlish is a full-fledged member of the family. Sometimes Angelica, Dina's friend, feels that it is she who is incomplete. She can eat bean soup from the day before yesterday, or just drink tea with bread and butter. Pers will simply not understand a meal without his favorite liver pate. He will look with a look that Angelica calls "eat yourself," and squirming his paws, will move away from the bowl with warm milk or something else that cats are supposed to eat. He will move away and sit down, and irritably begin to lick his shining black fur, showing, not long I will stay so beautiful with such a vile food." If Angelica sleeps just in bed, then Pearly Ash exclusively on the pillow. He pays for this pleasure with his voice. Rinning, with distinct every pee-pee, endless, enjoying himself. Purring is the best song for falling asleep. Especially if there is a blizzard and wind outside the window, the glass is thickly covered with snow, and the cat sings and sings directly into your ear, and your hand is drawn from the warmth of the blanket to the living warmth of a silky cat's body. For a marvelous purr, Merlishu forgives everything. Capresses food drop on the floor during an unsuccessful jump, books and newspapers, curious wandering around the kitchen table, bitten cord from the computer, wilted balsam, whose pot is turned into a cat box. At first, Merlish ran away from the scene of the crime, looking around thievingly. Later, he only squinted indulgently when Angelica picked him up, stroking again. "Well, I'll bear it." But when a stranger appeared in their house, which the cat considered his fiefdom, the wary, frozen posture of Merlish showed Angelica that the cat is worried as never before in his life. She wanted to pick him up habitually, but the cat, like a small black panther, with the distrust of a wild animal, rushed under the sofa and disappeared there for a long time. He reappeared late in the evening, without waiting for the guest to leave, and with the same slithering, clinging to the floor movements, began to make his way to his bowl. The bowl was full flatteringly to the brim with his favorite pâté. But the cat did not give in, and having eaten, again disappeared into the dark corners of the apartment. The guest stayed to live with them. Maybe he was not a bad man, but he thought that the cat should be a cat, and that's it. Eat from a bowl. God forbid to come to the table to ask. And liver is for people, but for an animal, something simpler. Sleep in a chair at best, and will jump where it is not supposed to, and a hard male hand literally sweeps Merlish on the floor. The cat lurks. At first offended, he became more and more wild every day. Already did not come to kitty, 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 kitty. Got out at the call from somewhere from under the bathtub, and absolutely refused to sing, even if the house was one Angelica, and he couldn't see from under the bathtub, or maybe he just wasn't interested in Angelica's behavior. In the evening, she used to lie on the bed with a book. Now she sits in the kitchen and in the room when new man is watching TV. Angelica puts food in 2 bowls, takes it to the man, puts it on the floor for the cat, and sits on the stool again. She stares at the book and stares. He comes back to the room very late before he and the cat had their 7th dream at this time. And now at this time the man only turns off the TV. One day there was a noise at home. Yes, such a noise that Merliash thought it was the beginning of the repair. It's a terrible thing. God forbid any cat should have to endure it. He crawled deep under the bathtub, under the wet cold pipe, and waited. And then the house became quiet. Merlish did not believe the silence, and all sat in his shelter, until familiar knees crouched in front of the bathtub and reached his hand into the dark depths. That night he slept in his usual place on his pillow. Only he was restless. When his coat became quite wet, and not at all from washing, he shook himself unhappily, got out and moved to a chair. But the mistress got up and again carried him to her and tucked his face into it. The cat humbled himself and dragged out his eternal measure r. For a while, engrossed in his novel, Angelica withdrew from Dina. But when after a grandiose scandal, she parted with the boyfriend, she reached for her friend. In Angelica's horoscope, obviously, from above there was such a given. If usually her life flowed smoothly, then on holidays invariably happened some kind of nasty thing. This time it was the flu. Actually, maybe she hadn't gotten sick if she hadn't gone shopping for a present for Dina. The store was jammed. I barely managed to squeeze through the crowd, hold out my hand with the money, and crawl back with an acrobatic trick, clutching my change, purse, and a box with a crystal writing instrument to my chest. The troika must have been gone for an hour. When the bus finally arrived and the crowd rushed to take it by storm, Angelica realized that she had to walk, so she walked straight along the road. She wanted to hiss like a cat that had been pissed off. Damn this 8th of March. It's like a litmus test. If on this day a woman buys flowers herself, on her even hang a sign, lonely, which in our country, unlike the enlightened West, is equivalent to unhappy. Therefore, all women's novels and colorful covers about how this is such a nobody needs gray mouse suddenly falls directly on the head of a beautiful prince. There's no such thing in real life. In life, there are 4 unmarried ladies per 1 bachelor of 40 years old. Brakes squealed under her ear, and Angelica, rushing to the right, fell into the wet snow on her knees. It was a poem about how she got to a drier place, took off and shook out the snowy mush from her boots, and then walked home. The next day, she woke up and immediately realized the temperature was high. It's cold under the blanket. Her throat burned as if sandpaper had been driven over it. Her nose swelled in 2. It's like, what will? Angelica looked up at him with watery eyes she could barely stand. The man took her under his elbow and led her outside. Do you have vodka at home? He asked. She immediately imagined an alcoholic who had decided to make a profit at her expense. True, he didn't look like an alcoholic, but who knows? Maybe I have a husband at home? He chuckled. You don't go to drugstores in such a state when you have a husband. The circumstances became clearer only when they went up to her room, and he first of all began to pour almost boiling water into the bathtub. And then he poured in a packet of salt. I've flown to the north before. Frosts of -50 are the norm there, and if someone fell down, we treated them this way. Put your feet here, and tell me where the alcohol is. and the raspberries. Such a potion made Angelica as wet as a mouse. She lay in bed, wrapped in a blanket, and felt the sickness recede. She was terribly sleepy. She woke up when it was getting dark. It was snowing outside the window, and Angelica did not understand whether it was morning or evening, or what time of year it was. She thought it was winter. Large white flakes flickered in the gap between the curtains. Then she smelled a bitter odor. It was related to one thing. Once upon a time at school, the boys had thrown together and bought a sprig of mimosa for the 8th of March for all the girls in the class. She pulled herself up. There was a mimosa next to her hand, still clutching her handkerchief, and from the kitchen smelled like freshly brewed coffee. Now in the mornings, when Dina was getting ready for work, she saw a different person in the mirror. There was nothing left of the intimidated, harassed young woman who belonged in some asylum for the poor. She still spent money on herself sparingly, but she looked quite dignified. Dina's usual clothes were jeans and a light sweater. Her hair was cut short, and for some unknown reason, it began to curl slightly. Slim, trim, with a good figure, with light, tasteful makeup, Dina made a good impression. But it was her eyes that changed the most. The look became aloof and rigid. It was clear that such a lady was not so easy to fool, and she would not be able to sit on her neck. Dina sometimes distantly thought that recently she would have behaved quite differently. So the other day she stopped by the convenience store to buy something for dinner. She chose the apple and cinnamon pancakes that Mickey loved. The clerk bagged a dozen and put the pancakes on the scale. Dina reached for the bag, and then the clerk slapped her lightly on the arm. "Don't take it off the scale. I haven't counted it yet." The old Dina would have smiled guiltily and babbled, Yes, of course, sorry." The present Dinah gave me a cold look. "I understand the words. I don't have to be beaten. Treat your customers better or you'll be kicked out of this place." Then she turned around and left the store. She bought her groceries for dinner elsewhere. She solved the apartment issue in her own way. She took a small loan and bought a room in a former hostel. She really liked this style in this building, 2 wings connected by a hexagonal tower. And this tower had rooms, and one of them went to Dina. The previous owner loved his dwelling and made it a mini apartment with a tiny kitchen and a bathroom. It was Dina and Mickey's first place of their own, and they both loved it. So many windows. The sun went from one to the other during the day. And Mickey, who didn't like the dark, was provided with a lighthouse until evening. Dina paid off the loan in 2 years, and then she started to think about selling the room, taking another loan and buying a 1-room apartment or even a 2-room apartment. But she hesitated. She really liked this house in the center of the city and the top floor of the tower above only the sky. And her hairdressing salon, on the contrary, was in the basement. But Dina had arranged it so that it was unusually warm and cozy. The ladies waited their turn on a soft sofa covered with artificial fur, admired a large, beautiful aquarium, leafed through magazines, and drank coffee. But even more often they chatted. Everyone easily found a common language with Dina, and the small basement soon turned into a real women's club. Dina became a real stylist. She almost always found something to advise her clients, prompted them, and when they agreed with her, the result was so stunning that the ladies left in admiration. And when Dina was at home, her phone rang every now and then. Someone asked to sign up for a haircut, for styling. In short, the business was gaining momentum. The circle of acquaintances expanded dramatically, but Dina had only 2 real friends at this time. Angelica, who finally successfully married, but always found time to drop by once a week for a coffee. Both young women had gone through a streak of hardship. Both life had hardened them. They could be proud of it, but continued to be a support for each other. The second friend was Alexander, her son's nanny. Dina's example also influenced her, and from the former shy girl, unable to study, she began to turn into a keen person. It turned out that Alexander was very enticing to travel. But since she had neither means nor opportunities to travel to distant lands, she took up local history. She was also going to be eventually hired at the city library, and she was waiting for a place. As for Dina's relatives, things were different here. Her father was recovering little by little, and the family lived amicably. Even Angelica had lost some of her bad temper. Dina's younger brother was finishing his studies and was going to get married. Dina liked his fiancée, and she was calm for her relatives. As for her ex-husband, Dina involuntarily chuckled, remembering the law of boomerangs. They were officially divorced, and John now had to pay alimony, which was a big nuisance for him. He tried to prove in court that he receives the very little, a living wage, where there is still a child to support. But even the judge shamed him, reminding him that to shift all the responsibilities for the maintenance of his son on the shoulders of his wife, unworthy of a man. Then John demanded from Dina that all the alimony, which she will transfer she did not spend, and put on the book. Otherwise, I know you're gonna blow all that money on crap. And I want all the money to go to Mickey. Dina squinted, looked at her ex-husband for a few moments, and then in a few words outlined to him the route she proposed to take. And for some reason it didn't even occur to John to raise a hand to the young woman, even though he'd done it so easily before. John had not yet found a new mate for himself. Women appeared in his life, but none of them stayed for long, notwithstanding his petty, cruel character. When he broke up with his girlfriend, he would get drunk, and if his drunkenness was particularly cruel, he would go to his parents in the village, where he would come to his senses. Each time it was given to him more and more difficult. He was sinking both outwardly and inwardly, and it was already beginning to be noticed. His parents blamed their son for everything that had happened and repeated that he had ruined his life by breaking up with Dina. In turn, the young woman kept in touch with the old people. She knew that she would never forget the kindness they had shown her at the most difficult moment. Now Dina had no need to hide her address, and once every few months the old people would visit her grandson, bringing with them a purse of village gifts. In return, Dina also tried to do something good for her former father-in-law and mother-in-law. She paid for the water supply to the house and promised to help with the gas supply. It was tacitly agreed that when Mickey grew up a little, he would spend the summer in the village with his grandparents. Not all 3 months, of course. Dina was saving up child support so she could go to the seaside with the child once a year. She still hadn't thought about changing her personal life, up to a certain point. Dina did not have many male clients. Usually all her working hours were distributed among women. Even a dense record was formed. It was impossible to get to her just like that. Still, a couple of times a day men came down to the basement with a question. Can I get a haircut? Dina worked fast, and if she had free time, she did not refuse them. But this handsome young man, smoothing his brown hair, seemed familiar to her. Dina simply invited him to come in and sit in the chair. She knew she had a terrible memory for faces. She might not recognize even a close acquaintance if she saw him wearing a new jacket and hat, for example. Conversely, she might greet a stranger with a friendly hello, mistaking him for someone she knew. How will we cut our hair? Dina asked habitually, taking the scissors. To your taste. Such an answer was not uncommon, and the young woman only nodded. Still, she could not escape the feeling that she knew this man. Their eyes met in the large mirror, and he asked, "How is your arm? Is it healed?" "Anthony," she gasped, "I never thought I'd see you again." "And he confessed, I tried to find you. I had your passport in my hands. I knew your name and address." Dina experienced an extraordinary feeling of bliss. He was looking for her. "But this comrade," Anthony grinned, "when I came, I said that you no longer lived here. I even went to your house in the village, but they wouldn't give me an address there either. I warned everyone," Dina said. "I didn't want my ex-husband to find me, but I couldn't have predicted that you would come looking for me." They smiled at each other and couldn't contain their joy. On the stairs leading to the basement, they heard the clatter of heels as another client hurried to Dina. "I realize you're busy, but maybe we could meet in the evening." How Dina would like to sit with Nikita somewhere in a cafe, to talk without hurrying. But Alexander had warned her in the morning that she couldn't stay late. "I have to let the nanny go today," Dina said. It was as if they were afraid of losing each other again, and Anthony looked up hopefully. "But you can walk me home," she said. "Come back at 7 o'clock tonight. We'll talk on the way." In the life of Alexander Nanny, who Dina hired for her son and who over the years has become not only an assistant, but also a close friend too, there were changes. This story happened in the summer, when Alexander with a backpack and dogs went to that deep forest zone, which borders with the reserve. It was 11 o'clock in the evening. The light of day had almost faded, and only somewhere on the edge of the sky was casting a greenish transparency. For the frogs, it was star time. In this small swamp, in the deep forest, who could they fear? They were out in force. No, this trip was an adventure after all. Alexander lay on her stomach in her small, fully prepared for the night tent, flipped through books by the light of the lantern, and as hard as she could inspire herself with the feeling of, and we have grass. It was very cozy here, as if in a small house. But to think that there, separated only by a cloth, a dense protected forest, and if anything, they wouldn't find her here forever and ever. The most sensible thing to do was to rely on the dogs. The dogs were quiet. They were dozing at the entrance to the tent. The German shepherd stretched carelessly on his side, which meant that he did not smell any danger at all, and the alibi lay regal and motionless, like a lion guarding the Alupkin palace. Beck and Can were a reliable defense. It is, of course, good to bring what has been started to the end, thought Alexander. But was it really necessary to come here? Alexander was a passionate person. You can't do much on vacation if you want to. Familiar people were already habitually going abroad, expanding their routes every year. Are you going to Egypt again? And we, with a gasp, in Paris. And we're going to Thailand. We want to have new impressions. Alexander has already realized that you can get new impressions anywhere. For example, during last year's accident, which lasted for a week, and the apartments was like on the street, -20. Warming stiffened fingers at the open oven door, she felt like a resident of the besieged city. Traveling with a tent, even simple weekend getaways, was a thrill too. Right now, they'd often traveled with her friend Angelica and stayed on the banks of the Volga, and everywhere there is close to housing. But it turned out that Angelica had a bad cold. The trip was disrupted, and Alexander had been thinking about it for so long that she gave up and decided to go alone. Having become a local historian, she knew a lot about her native places, and a stone with a shell imprint found on the shore reminded her that the ocean had once splashed here. Abandoned villages, temples of the past centuries, now beginning to revive, places favored by artists, from where magnificent panoramas of the Volga opened up, mountains, caves, about which legends are made. But she was especially attracted by what she had read about, but had not yet seen for herself. So she learned about this place in the heart of the local mountains, where everything is covered with some mysticism. There was talk of a biological defense. Nature kept its secrets from man. Even harmless birds behaved like predators. It was said that the face of the mistress of the mountains had been seen here. Alexander sipped hot tea from her mug. But isn't man part of nature? Why should it be necessary to fight with people like her, whose weapons are a penknife and a small hatchet for chopping dried wood? A sudden movement where the dogs lay made Alexander flinch. Bam became alert, obviously sensing something in the distance. A moment later, the white hand came up. What had alarmed them so obviously? Alexander didn't know what she should do, whether to hug the dogs, hold them close to her so she felt safer, or walk out of the tent with them, try to understand why the dogs seemed increasingly agitated. Theoretically, there were wolves here, but not many, and they always shunned humans. There hadn't been a single attack in years, especially in the summer, when the beast was fed. But I guess no fools came here alone. Hand's a wolfhound by nature. Maybe he can handle it. And Bam's got a lot of strength, too. The dogs were already whining and barking. No, sitting and waiting was even more frightening. Alexander took the lantern and lifted the tent flap. A small spot of light and a black, so hostile forest, and seemingly in the distance, a slightly audible crunch. Look for it, she waved her hand at Bam. The sheepdog darted into the thicket without a second thought, not hesitating in its direction, as if it were waiting there. Hannah Alexander grasped the collar, held it close to her. Hush, hush, she repeated, trying to hear what was happening out there in the distance. Bam barked. He found something. It certainly wasn't a wolf or another dangerous foe. The girl knew the nuances of her dog's barks. Something from a dog's point of view important, but not threatening. She put a leash on Hannah. Lead the way. The worst part would be getting ticks or falling in. Alexander tried to shine her light on the ground beneath her feet, but Han was dragging her, only the branches smacked her in the face. An excitedly waving tail sickled and barking now in two voices, barking that made her ears pop. Alexander raised the flashlight higher and froze. In a small clearing, leaning against a pine tree, a man was happy. She rushed to say it, as she always told those who had close encounters with her boys. But this time it was more likely to come out of inertia. The man responded. He gasped and spoke softly. "Please, untie me, if you can, and leave soon." "Well, he's tied up too." "No, nothing good can come of this. Anything but an accident." Alexander fumbled in her jeans pocket for a penknife. It was a very small knife, good for cutting bread and sausage, not sawing rope. But if she did manage it, in case he did. "I won't hurt you," the man said even more quietly. "Don't be afraid." Alexander unfolded the knife and walked over. She was ashamed of her thoughts, but on the surface, and deep down, fear lived. He shifted heavily, revealing his back. His hands were tied behind his back, and tightened cruelly. The brushes were no longer a living color. This is not the way one binds to frighten. One binds without caring, because soon it will be just a body. "What happened?" Alexander asked. "Why did you ask?" "You know less." He took a breath. "I came to my friend's masterclass, to his students. So we're looking at an intelligent man. Martial arts, jigging. I gave a masterclass, watched the guys. Then the pause was longer. Speech was confused, as was breathing. We were sitting in a cafe in a hotel. Two guys got attached to us. We didn't want to get tied up for a long time. They started. Then we put them down. I don't know, boo. Maybe you're tough guys. At night in the room, I don't remember. I woke up in the car, hands tied. They brought me back, beat me up, and told me they'd give me 2 hours. Then they'd start the hunt. They said no one would find him here." Everything that could have happened next flashed before Alexander's mind in 1 minute. Of course, in his condition, he wouldn't get far. Hunting. With dogs. They'd kill him. Witnesses are impossible here. People only come here once every 3 years. Her tent's close by. They'll smell it. And of course, they won't let her live. "Are your legs and ribs all right?" the girl asked quickly, and grabbed his arm. "Let's go." All bodily pains were to be put aside for later. "We'll sort it out afterwards, if we're alive." "Home," she told the dogs to go home. She dragged him toward the tent, the dogs rushing ahead. He followed her hard, but he made it through the bushes, so he could walk after all. No, she probably dragged him. There was some kind of alien strength in her now. Not hers, she was being carried. What time was that? 1:15. Alexander held the lantern in the same hand where the clock glinted. "We still have 40 minutes. He tried to almost compel her with every syllable. "No, leave me alone. Commissioner isn't going to work. They're gonna get both of them killed for the company. They're gonna get both of them." The tent. Alexander slipped inside, grabbed the nearly empty backpack. "What's important now?" "An axe. There'd be time to wrap things up here, but there isn't. There's only one road. Through the woods, downhill. There's one place to hide. It's a long shot, but it's all we can think of. They'll find it right away. There's no path, only one direction down the mountainside. There's old pine. It's like soap." Maybe the man had diverged a little, but now they were running almost side by side. "There's a ravine coming up. There are roots from under the ground. Grab onto them." Alexander recognized the place where she climbed in the morning. There is a pine tree. Some of the roots are uprooted, sticking out like spiders' legs. And there's a dark ravine, about 2 meters. You can only jump into it. The walls are almost sheer. But if you hold on to the roots, you can throw your body over. The dogs had no need. They went down and climbed up, and were waiting for them on the other side. It was much brighter on the bank of the Volga, a clear moonlit night. And the surface of the water mirrored not black, but gray sky from the multitude of stars. Into the water. Alexander forced herself not to shout who knows where they are now, but her whisper sounded like a shout. All along the water, to make tracks? The dogs, of course, rushed after her. When there was something unusual, they always stayed close. And this one was not just unusual, it was formidable. It's time to look around for the enemy. Who to rip? What's the bottom here? There are pools and steep cliffs this way. And there's a current there. It takes months to find someone who's drowned, sometimes months later. They didn't feel the cold of the water. Alexander looked around the shore. Where is it? There's a rock protruding like a white horn and a birch above it. Over there. What's there? A cave. Hurry. When they found it with Angelica, it was unremarkable, just a hollow in the rock. It was uncomfortable to spend the night here, but it was cool during the day and they spent a few hours escaping the heat and marked the cave in their memory. Besides, the place was inconspicuous when viewed from the river. A horn-like rock obscured the entrance. Alexander wasn't expecting it, but the man, realizing where to go, climbed up first to pull her in by the hand. Time, 3:30. She didn't continue. It was clear enough. The hunt's already underway. Now we must make sure there's not a sound, so that the dogs would not find themselves barking at the sight of strangers. Silence, silence, almost with her lips repeated Alexander. The dogs were still lying quietly at her feet. They would probably reach the river. Only one thing, if they lost the trail there. Some more time passed. Only the rumor lived now. The splash of an occasional wave, the cry of a bird, and somewhere still very far away voices. The man quickly fumbled for his backpack and took out an axe. And with his free hand he pushed Alexander further into the depths of the cave, pressed him to the ground. It won't help, she whispered about the axe. I'll stop one. How many are there? 4, he whispered, but if they come up, I'm that way you're here. No call out the bad, quiet. The distant splash of water, someone else's speech, silence. They heard nothing else. What if they went the other way? What if they burst out of the thicket right at the entrance to the cave? The dogs would step in, but what if they had guns? Alexander lay on the rocks with his head in his hands, wishing with all his might that he could not be. It was getting light, he said quietly. The sky was already dark blue. It was a reminder of the need to hold out against the unclean forces until the roosters sang. Soon the first meteor would be coming, the boats. It would hardly be safe to hunt people. Khan crawled up, cuddled up against his warm side. This one, also sitting now, leaning against the rocks, did not look like a partisan lying down before a grenade throw. What's your name? Sam. What's yours? Alexander. The light was getting clearer. Alexander raised her head and found that she had dozed off. It probably didn't last long. It was light, but still early morning. The water was a liquid silver, and the red glare of the rising sun. The dogs flanked her on all sides, warming her and glad to be able to lay on top of her head. This short rest only made her realize how sore her muscles were, how heavy her head felt on her stiff neck. Sam did not seem to have slept at all. He was still sitting against the wall. He didn't care about his appearance, of course, but... Let me take a look at you, Alexander said. He covered her hand. Don't be. I'd had worse. But what you've done. Don't get down on your knees. Let's get out of here. The coast is bad, rocky, narrow. And then there's a low place, and there's a forest. I wrote about that forester. He knows me. But the road there is dirt. No car. Cars come there from the national park. Rarely. We have horses. You know how? She had forgotten all about jigging, but she thought he smiled in the darkness. I can do it. Then let's go. They made their way along the riverbank, looking like the most careless tourists who lost their backpacks. Got lost. Who'd been totally screwed over by this place. Anyway, Evan the forester was startled when the girl he knew well appeared in front of him, covered in mud, scratched, and disheveled. Nevertheless, there was no need to convince him that it was not a drunken delusion and not tales of the Viennese forest. Everything happens, and troublemakers, and drownings, and scumbags from abroad. He tried not to get involved with them. It's too expensive. That's how I figure it. You get on horseback to the highway that goes to Moscow. You go home. This is for Sasha, and you catch the trucker. Who the hell knows who's after you? Don't risk the train. I will now saddle. Alexander shook her head. Evan, just one. I'm afraid of horses. There's no way I'm going. What are we gonna do with you? And then you'll radio for someone to come get me. I'm in no hurry. Her fear of horses comes from a time immemorial. When in the park on Shrovetide, 5-year-old Sashenka horse took down, threw off, not wanting anything bad, just walking measurably. and that feeling of power still gave the girl terror. Sam took the bridle like something native, and without a foot in the stirrup, he was on the horse in one stride. Alexander, she even backed away. But with me, he bent over with a flexible, strong movement and held out his hands to her, palms up. I won't go. Oh, you are, said the forester angrily. Your shaggy fools are even scarier. They have teeth. And the old horse has what to do with her. She won't drop her child. Go on, I'll get out of here. I'm not saying goodbye, Sam said. Alexander sat down on the grass, put her arms around her knees, and listened to the rapidly receding stomp of hoofs. The dry sounds resembled gunshots. She cried softly, Tomorrow I'll write a letter to my mother. I'm living well until they shoot me. Would you like a thrill? Can was sniffing the ground with keen interest. He must have smelled a mouse or a lizard. Alexander took a long time to recover from her adventure, but Sam found her. She went to see him in the capital, and now the relationship was growing stronger. Sam already missed her and called her to move soon. They were to be married in the fall. For Mickey's birthday, the young women decided to have a sort of celebration dinner. Alexander had organized the cleaning, although the small room was already clean. Angelica also came in advance with large packages. In addition to the gift for the birthday boy, there was something else for the festive table, because in the tiny kitchen, actually, a nook, separated by a closet, not much to turn around. But of course, the cake was already on the table. One of Dina's clients was a confectioner, as they say, from God, and now she had surpassed herself by preparing this work of confectionery art. A chocolate bear sat on the top, in the forest glade, and the little boy kept his admiring eyes on it. He knew that it was forbidden to touch the cake, but he could not move away from the table and silently contemplated his sweet treasure. Angelica was finishing hanging the balloons. That our mom is delayed, right, Mickey? She said, tying the biggest balloon in the shape of Cheburashka on a string. Mom's working, said the boy, not taking his eyes off the cake. Working, yes. Good thing we don't have any hot meals planned. We'd have to heat everything up. She promised we'd be at the table at 6:30 sharp. But her hair salon is open till the last customer. Alexander was putting sandwiches on a plate. She said worriedly, I'm afraid they'll dry out. I should probably cover them with foil. Caught some capricious client who makes her curls 20 times to redo, suggested Angelica. Or tells the history of her family up to the 7th, said Alexander. Well, Dinah knows how to put them delicately in their place. Maybe she stopped by the store. She wants to buy Mickey something else. That's the most likely. The last thing I think is that Dina's been held up by some guy. She told me more than once that she was so full of so-called love and family life that she'd never. Well, everyone has their own happiness. Angelica jumped off the couch. Fixed the bedspread. You and I have found good men, and she has what? Work? It's good that she loves it so much. Mommy works. Mickey touched her finger to a creamy rose and then put it in his mouth. Be patient a little bit, sweetheart. Now we'll sit at the table. Alexander looked into the boy's eyes. Or are you hungry? Maybe I should feed you. Well, what is it really? Where's Dina? Len, call her. The boy's waiting. But Angelica didn't have time to dial the right number. There were footsteps. Only one person could have come here to the top of the tower. Finally, Alexander hurried to open the door, swung it open, and stepped back in surprise. Dina was not alone. Behind her shoulder stood a tall young man. Dinah stepped to the side to introduce her guest. This is Anthony. The friends eyed to themselves. Of course, they were aware of that dating history, but they had no doubt that this would be just one of those episodes that would forever remain in their memories. How did you find each other? But Dina did not respond to Alexander's exclamation. She picked up in her arms Mickey, who was always shy of strangers and now hid behind her back. And the hero of the evening, please love and applaud. Anthony unknowingly, as if out of thin air, took out a red card and handed it to the birthday boy. A few minutes later, everyone was sitting at the table, and Dina was pouring champagne into glasses. Mickey, who had gone on Anthony's lap, did not take his eyes off the present, even forgot about the cake. And outside the window the rain was ending, and it looked as if a rainbow was about to burst into the sky and begin to shimmer with different colors.